The April 27th meeting of the Massachusetts School District Board of School District is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hit the gavel. Hit the gavel. Okay. Ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. My name is Renee Blake. Thank you for having me, and thanks to Mrs. Brucker for nominating me to speak tonight, and to all the 4th grade teachers at my school. I think Eagleville is a great school because of its caring teachers who motivate us every day and make it fun to learn. I also like the school because of the variety of clubs to choose from. There are so many clubs to choose, there's something for everybody. My final reason for why I think Eagleville is a great school is because there is a program called the Watchdogs where dads of students can help out at school all day. And it is fun to have my dad at school all throughout the day with me and my sister. That is why I think Eagleville is a great school and why it is always exciting to be there.
All right, we have certificates for both of you to become junior school board directors. Are you ready to handle all the responsibilities that come with these certificates? Are you sure? Okay, there you go, man. Congratulations. Thanks for coming out tonight. You did very good.
Good job. It's for now. Good job.
All right. Well, I'm not as adorable or well-spoken, but I'll try to do my best. By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of the meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. In terms of attendance, we have all the board members present, and now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Zerbe for some recognitions.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great honor and privilege to have a check presentation this evening from the Education Foundation of Methacton community. This evening we have Mark Constable, President of the Education Foundation, along with many members here. Mr. Constable, would you like to come forward and present the check?
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe, board members, and members of the audience. Those of you who are familiar with the Education Foundation for the Methacton community know that we try our best to help support academics, athletics, and the arts at Methacton. This evening we're actually going to present 3 gifts but 1 check. So those of you who follow your agenda, I believe it's on page 8, items 7, 8, and 9 are the gifts that we will be giving this evening. The 2 smaller gifts, just so you know, because you might be able to connect and feel connected to some of these individuals, to the Senior High School Art Department, thanks to a grant submitted by Beth Hall, will be contributing $999 towards the purchase of some DSLR cameras for the art technology program. We'll also be presenting a gift to Wendy Keller, the sponsor of the Worcester Environmental Club. This is just a portion of that grant. This will allow them to continue with some of the activities that they've been doing so successfully as part of the Worcester Environmental Club. In particular, they've done several nature areas. This will allow them to use binoculars to track some data, record the data, and so forth. So some exciting things happening there. But the big gift is in part a part of a lot of hard work, community-wide support. I'd like to recognize Ms. Cindy Bogley, our Vice President, and our Chair for the Art Corks and Forks event. Because of her efforts and the efforts of her committee, a lot of hard work by the community, we had committed the proceeds to that event to help support the Methacton High School Marching Band's quest to get to the 1970, or not the 1970, the 20, that would be back in time. We're going to the future, 2017, the Outback Bowl in Tampa. And we said, whatever the proceeds are, we're going to contribute. And because of a lot of support and a lot of hard work, we're going to present that check this evening for $10,500 to the Methacton High School Marching Band. Let's do it proud in Tampa. So. It's a wonderful community, a lot of support, and I think Angela would like to get the band and the members of our board together for a little PR shot, if you don't mind. So, and Dr. Zerbe?
I just wanted to add one thing. I
Yes.
asked Dr. Roth, or Mr. Roth, to come up and accept on behalf of the board.
Yes.
For those that don't know, he has been passionate about the marching band forever and helps out. And I understand he's going to be a roadie on the trip down. So he's going to enjoy that very long school bus ride with them.
Come on down.
Come on board, members of the band parents.
Let's see if we can get in the middle here.
Okay.
Get some space.
Some success. I know. And catch it at a giant bang.
You should just take a picture this way.
I know. Everyone's calm down. How are you? Good. Good. How are you doing? Nice to see you. My goodness, for once my check's not big enough.
I'll count to three. 1, 2. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Yay, it's okay. I just want to sign up.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Mark.
Where do they go?
We're 27, 28.
December.
We're very fortunate that the Education Foundation recognizes many different activities and supports many different activities in the Methacton community. Mark Constable's leadership is unwavering and has been a strong advocate for everything Methacton. Mr. Constable, again, thank you, and on behalf of the Methacton School District, thank you to the board of the Education Foundation. I hope there's many more checks and many more years to come. With that said, one of the things in order of business to come, we've been working for a number of months on a strategic plan. And here this evening, we have our consultant, Joanne Parati, with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit, along with two of the most important people that have helped me get this thing coordinated and organized. We have Angela Lynch as well. She's not presenting on the matter tonight, but Angela was one of my two right-hand men in this, or persons in this process. And of course, we have Peggy Bonder. Peggy has been there from the very beginning as support for this process, and as you'll see with the unveiling of the strategic planning process this evening, we will, you can see that we put a lot of hard work, not only from that small team, but from a concerted effort by about 80-some individuals within the community. So without any further ado, Ms. Parati, I think you're planning on presenting. We're going to use a screen. I asked the board, there are some handouts at the table. You might want to take them with you back to the seats in the front, and Ms. Parati will start her presentation. Thank you.
The screen will come down? Yes, I'll put it down. Okay. Yep.
While we're waiting, if the marching band needs strategic planning, I'd be happy to help in December in Tampa. Well, good evening, everyone, and I would like to thank your superintendent of schools, Dr. David Zerbe. It's been honored to work with Dr. Zerbe and his leadership team almost now 7-8 months with the help of Peggy Bonner as the internal coordinator. I have served as the external coordinator and facilitator of the strategic plan. And I also would like to thank Angela for putting together this fabulous PowerPoint this evening, and which is now going to be turned into a document that'll be on the website. So I'd like to start out with the presentation. The strategic plan will run from 2016 to 2022. It's a blueprint for success, and we love using that term, blueprint for success, because it's a blueprint, it's a foundation, it's a roadmap for the future of the Methacton School District. We started the strategic planning process back in the fall, and we're really kind of in the meat and potatoes of the strategic plan right now. It did involve more than 80 individuals. At various times, we had all 80, sometimes almost 90 people together. We met on weekends, we met in the evening, we met during the day. It involved steering teams, focus groups, subcommittees. So I was thrilled, being the external facilitator, to see the passion and energy that was really brought to the table as we looked at the vision for the Methacton School District for the next few years. With our individual stakeholder group of over 80 people, we ended up with 5 subcommittees and 5 focus areas. So I'd like to go to the next slide, and we looked at the mission. And when you develop a strategic plan, it's very, very important to always look at the mission, because that's what drives you for the future for the school district. And so when you read this mission statement, the Methacton School District is an exemplary student-focused and community-centered environment that prepares learners to meet the demands of our evolving world. And this was really a representative group that worked on this strategic plan. There's very powerful words in there: student-focused, community-centered, preparing learners to meet the demands of our evolving world. And so everything that we did really focused back focuses back on that mission statement. And it's very important to understand that Methacton School District has a comprehensive plan that is part of the requirement for the Department of Education here in Pennsylvania. And that compliance piece has a lot of check-off boxes, a lot of narratives. It has the focus of the district, but as we developed this strategic plan, we really wanted to put a lens on really looking at the global piece of the Methacton School District and really look at the larger piece in that lens to develop the strategic plan. We also looked at the vision, and the Methacton School District will empower all learners to develop talents, encourage personal growth and success, and inspire leadership to transform our future. And again, when you look at that mission, it's a really powerful mission statement. It's not a generic vision statement. It's one that's specific for the Methacton School District. Empowering all learners, develop talents, encourage personal growth and success, and inspire leadership to transform our future. So again, that's the vision that we see here in the Methacton School District. This part is really exciting. This part really involved a lot of passion and energy, and I want to hold up a nameplate today because, let me see if I can say it correctly, it is Gayatri, one of the student representatives for your school board, was really involved and came up with this concept of taking the word Methacton and turning it into the core values. So one of the things that I think is so important when we brought together 80 stakeholders for the Methacton School District, it wasn't just the administrative team. It just wasn't teachers. It was parents. It was community. It was business men and women, and it was students and our school board members. And so when you look at the core values, this is, again, very, very powerful for the Methacton School District. Using the letter M, motivate to succeed, empower all learners, trust in teamwork, honor our heritage, appreciate our diversity, commit to growth, transform our future, open new opportunities, nurture our talents. And what's exciting about the core values is when you spell out Methacton and when you look at all that together, it's a powerful statement for the school district. But if you look at just the M, motivate to succeed, we can do so much with that here in the Methacton School District. Empower all learners. So when you break it down and you look at each individual letter is so powerful, but put together, it's really the core values here in the Methacton School District. This blueprint for success, starting tomorrow, will be up on the website. You'll be able to go to it as a document, to link onto it, to learn a little bit more about the strategic plan for 2016 to 2022. So if we go to the second page of the document, over on the left-hand side, that icon, the little green icon with the hand, when you click on that, that'll be a letter from Dr. Zerbe talking about the development of the strategic plan. Also on the right-hand side, you see the mission, the vision, and the core values, which we just discussed. And then you can see the awesome pictures of our students here in the school district. This next section starts with the focus areas that we developed in the development of the strategic plan. We have 5 focus areas. So focus area number 1, the black across the top, student growth and achievement, staff development, pupil services, and educational technology. So the little icon on the left, when that's clicked, Now you're really going to see everything that was developed under that one focus area of student growth, achievement, staff development, pupil services, and educational technology. What you're going to see is the objective, you're going to see the strategies, you're going to see the success indicator. You're going to see the people responsible for implementing that focus area. And then again, it continues with the next objective. What is really, again, powerful about this strategic plan, it's not a plan to plan. It's actually something that's going to be implemented. And it's actually going to have success and measurements, those measurable objectives. And so that's what's so important about the work that we did with such a large group of not only district personnel, but the community stakeholders. The second focus area is communications and community relations. And again, that icon on the left, once you click on it, it'll show you all the strategies, the measurable objectives, who's responsible for implementing it. If you look on the right, down in the bottom right-hand corner, one of the things that we did as we worked with the stakeholders is at the end of every session, we asked them to give their comments and their feedback. One of the pieces when I work with organizations and school districts on comprehensive and strategic planning, I have a terminology is silence is consent. And so silence is consent is very important to me when you develop a strategic plan, because everyone really needs to talk about those missions and visions and ideas and values about the school district. So as you go through the document tomorrow and spend more time reading it, you'll see some testimonials, you'll see some comments from some of our planning committee members. The bottom right-hand corner, as an educator and parent, I leave tonight very excited about the district's future. And these are actual comments that people wrote that were involved in the process. So that was very exciting to us in addition to the photos. The third area of focus is safety, operational technology, facilities, and infrastructure. On this particular slide, you see the two areas of safety and operational technology. And then the next slide will show facilities and infrastructure. And again, you'll have that icon. You can go click on it. You can really dig deep into the strategies and objectives of that focus area. The fourth focus area is district operations, financial management, and human resources. So on this particular slide, we're looking at district operations and financial management. On the next slide is human resources. And again, if we look at the bottom right-hand corner, a good process, critical thinking was excellent. So we pride ourselves as we worked on this that people really did have that opportunity to give critical thinking with this process, to really look at these focus areas and really dig deep into making this even a better district than it is right now. And then the fifth focus area was co-curricular activities, extracurricular activities, and athletics. And this one I love. I mean, what a great pun. We're on the right track. Now the real work begins, especially when you're talking about co-curricular activities and athletics. And so again, the icon, you can click on that and learn more in more detail about that focus area. It might be very hard from the back of the room to see this, but this really encompasses almost 100 people that worked on this process. We wanted to celebrate the work that they did. We wanted to recognize them and acknowledge them for the work that they did in developing this strategic plan. And then the next slide is the process moving forward. Because one thing, when you check on those icons and you read the strategies and you read the measurable objectives, that looks wonderful on paper, but now the real work begins implementing all those strategies. So we're going to be gathering feedbacks. Like I said, starting tomorrow, you can go to the front page of the website. You can click on this document. You can read it. We'd love to have your feedback. There will be an area for you to give us your feedback. That'll be till mid-May. We'll listen to what you have to say. That'll help us then really finalize the document. And then May 24th, we'd like to bring the document to the school board for final approval, and then distribute and communicate the plan. And I think the last bullet is probably the most important, because this plan will be the fabric of the organization, the fabric of this school district. It's part of what we do, it's who we are, and it does include all the stakeholders. And I always like to say that it's not like on Friday afternoon, Dr. Zerbe is going to make an announcement. Everyone stop what you're doing and go work on the strategic plan. That's not what's going to happen. The strategic plan is really part of the organization as far as staff job accountabilities. It's part of every child that walks through every door here of every school in the Methacton School District. So we're going to live and breathe this document. It's not a document that's going to be on a shelf. It's not a document that's going to be in a folder on a desktop, on a computer, but rather it's going to be part of what we do every day. And that was the end of the presentation. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank Methacton School District for asking me to be part of this process. The energy and passion developing this plan was absolutely exceptional. You have a terrific superintendent and leadership team that worked very hard with stakeholders here in the community to develop a really great plan. So thank you very much.
We can return to our seats.
How you doing?
No.
All right, moving right along, let's get into the reports. The first one up is the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee held its monthly meeting on April 13th at 7:30. All members of the Finance Committee were in attendance. There were 5 items on the agenda for that evening. The first item discussed was the daily substitute rate for the district. Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Whiteleather reviewed Methacton's current rates as well as those of the surrounding districts. The county high for Tier 1 was $115 per day, with the low being $80. The average of the 19 districts in the county was $95 per day. Methacton's current rate is at $85 per day, at the lower end of the range. Administration recommended increasing our Tier 1 rate, which represents 1 to 25 days of service, to $95 per day, and our Tier 2, currently at $95, to $105 a day. Finance Committee reviewed this recommendation and has brought forth the recommendation to the full board for a vote this evening. The second item reviewed was the proposed 2016-2017 school breakfast and lunch prices. The proposed rate increase for next school year for both breakfast and lunch will be 10 cents across all the district schools. The exact costs for each school's breakfast and lunch can be found within tonight's agenda under fiscal items letter D. This item is also up for board vote this evening. The third item that was discussed was the MCIU district cost plan for 2016-2017. Mr. Whiteleather reviewed the cost plan relating to any special education services that we anticipate using within the MCIU for the next school year. The committee reviewed the services and also requested to see some history in terms of see where we've fallen in the past in terms of our budgeted to actual expenses with the MCIU. This item will also be up for a board vote this evening. The fourth item that was addressed was the monthly financial reports. Mr. Whiteleather gave us an update as to where we stand for the current year fiscally. Expenditures, we are currently $622,000 less than the point this year, or last year. Many of the reasons that were discussed in prior months, several of the reasons being timing issues, as well as debt service refunding and bus driver severance payments. In terms of revenue, as of March 31st, we are down $3.38 million. Although local real estate taxes are up $200,000 and interim real estate taxes are up $30,000, we continue to see offsets in earned income tax and delinquent real estate tax collections. These items have also been discussed at prior board updates. Other drivers for the decrease in revenue are the IDEA funds being down $190,000, transfer taxes down $100,000, state revenues relating to Harrisburg budget issues have caused our state revenues to be down $900,000, and a large chunk of the result of comparing the sale of the fixed assets to the prior year when we sold the buses. We also reviewed the list of bills and monthly treasury reports. The final item on the agenda that evening was a discussion of the 2016-2017 preliminary budget. Mr. Whiteleather reviewed all the information that evening, and that presentation was also shown at last week's work session. The Finance Committee reviewed all the cost drivers slide by slide, attempting to identify any other areas of cost reductions. There is still work to be done on next year's budget, and that work will continue up until the proposed final budget in May and final adoption in June. The meeting concluded with courtesy of the floor. Several members of the community asked questions regarding Plan-Con funding, high school course enrollments, custodial staff overtime, the district's AFR being posted to the district website, tax appeal status for Shenandoah, basic education funding from the state, and various items regarding the 2016-2017 line-by-line budget items. The meeting concluded just before 11 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on to the Property Committee, Mr. Dorn.
Yes, thank you. Our meeting was held on April 13th in the Farina Center. All were in attendance except Mr. Roth. The first item on the agenda was a discussion with Dr. Zerby and Mr. Maida, the wrestling coach for Methacton High School. We talked about the desire of the wrestling program and its boosters to build a wrestling facility, a wrestling room for the high school, and repurpose the existing wrestling room into some yet-to-be-determined use, either for a wellness center or several other things were discussed. The price of the project is about $1.9 million, and it is to be funded 100% through donations. We'll be discussing, I think that's on the agenda tonight, to put forward for the board to support the start of raising the funds. The second item that we discussed was entry security, in particular as it relates to 3 of our elementary schools, Worcester, Arrowhead, and Eagleville. We talked to our supplier about the electronic security recommendations they were making, and we asked the supplier to move forward with pricing those recommendations, all in the spirit of enhancing security for our students at those schools. The third project that we talked about was the field project update. We got an update from Fadavia on the current project. The lighting tests were held mid-April. We passed those tests, and we will be having our first lit event on Monday, May 2nd. So a lot to be celebrated, and I'm sure we're going to like to see a lot of the community come out and support that first event. In addition, as it relates to the field projects, we talked about the pending list of items that still needed to be completed, the punch list items, and when the general contractor would be completing these items. The next item we talked about has been an ongoing event. It's the facility assessment update. We now have a draft report that's being reviewed by Mr. Fretz in the district. We are looking for the committee to have a final report. This is a copy of said report that the board will be reviewing and looking to incorporate into its strategic planning processes over the next several years. And the last item we talked about, Dr. Zerbe gave an update on new facility use guidelines for the school districts, fields, gymnasiums, et cetera. This was primarily around the fields and the proposed usage guidelines. So this is going to be discussed with the various organizations, and it's all to make sure we stay in line with a lot of the commitments that we made on several of our fields, and particularly the lit fields. We had courtesy of the floor. We had 2 questions, one from Mr. Earnshaw, one from Mr. Andrews, and we adjourned the meeting at 7:20 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And now on to the Education Committee.
The Education Committee met on April 18th. Everyone was in attendance except for Dr. Zerbe. First on the agenda was the undersubscribed classes at the high school. There wasn't any major red flags here, but there was discussion around, there's always difficulty scheduling at the high school, and that we're looking forward to the consultant coming up with an even better plan in the future. Dr. Engstad gave an extended school year update, basically an overview of the program. There was a kindergarten registration update by Dr. Katona. We're up slightly at the same time than last year, but there's lots more registration to occur. There was also, the next thing on the agenda was the textbook adoption, which you will see which is on the agenda for this evening. There was a minor change with the cost due to it being more cost effective to purchase sooner rather than spread it out over time. The next item was the Methacton Digital Learning Initiative, which is also on the agenda for this evening, and a presentation was given at the last work session. There was a few tweaks that had been done from the previous month, changing some grade levels and amount of years, and just tweaking it to make it the most productive initiative as possible. As always, the enrollment report was given. An additional just item that came up that I thought was good to hear was that Dr. Engstad participated in attending a Director of Pupil Services conference that she mentioned was fantastic. There's a lot of new things always in education, and she was happy to go there, and it will be helpful for our district in the future. There was no questions for courtesy of the floor, and we adjourned at 8:45.
Thank you. And now on to the Policy Committee.
Thank you. The Policy Committee met on April 19th at 6:30. All members were in attendance, as well as Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Harney. We had a pretty ambitious agenda that night. We managed to get through 4 policies that were scheduled for 5-year review: enrollment in district, eligibility of non-residents, HIV infection, and postgraduate students. Those were moved to first reading with no changes. They're on the agenda for this evening. We had 1 brand-new policy that we discussed and moved to a first reading on the use of naloxone, also known as Narcan. It's a new policy that came to us courtesy of PSBA. We had 3 policies that were previously discussed that we've moved to a first reading for this evening: the organizational chart, non-discrimination in schools, non-discrimination for employees. We also have several other policies that remain on the agenda for next month, and hopefully we will get through those as well. The meeting adjourned at 7:30. We had no comments from the audience.
Thank you. And now on to the Intermediate Unit Report.
Thank you. The last intermediate unit meeting was on March 23rd, 2016. This month's meeting is tonight, so I will not have a report next month. The most important item that happened at the meeting is now stale news. It was the legislative update talking about what's happened with the state budget and the issue of the fiscal code. And I know we have had good news about that in the meantime. There was one item on the agenda that just a comment on that there is professional development agreement with the Methacton School District for elementary teachers, which is part of our continuing relationship with them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now on to the Technical Career Center.
Mr. Roth and I were not able to attend due to other board commitments. However, those glitches have now been worked out, so all the rest of the meetings will be attended. However, I did want to make note that we had 8 students become inducted in the National Technical Honor Society, and the giraffes, there's a little pun on that, is currently in St. Louis for the World Championships for the robotics team, so we wish them luck.
Very good, thank you. And now from our student board representatives.
Thank you. In sports, Smith Acton students continue to shine. In track and field, Caroline Duffy and Jeff Kirschenbaum have both committed to run at the Division I level in college. Caroline and Jeff are headed to St. Joe's and Lehigh, respectively, this fall. Along with that, the boys' track and field team is currently undefeated, and the girls' team has suffered only 1 loss. To continue, the boys' tennis team just clinched its third straight Pac-10 title in a row, with strong performances and leadership from seniors Nick Simeone and Harry Santanum. But the Acton softball team also continues this trend of success with only 1 loss this entire season, which is good for the least number of losses in the Pac-10. And finally, our baseball team is coming off an 8-0 win over Pac-10 rival Phoenixville. Congrats to all of our student athletes.
In other news, 8 students attended the Pennsylvania Future Business Leaders of America State Leadership Conference in Hershey earlier this month, from April 11th to 13th. 2 students, Jeffrey Mitchell and Ryan Walchonsky, placed 4th in the state in banking and financial systems, making them eligible to attend the national conference this July in Atlanta. I placed 5th in the state in the business communication event. This past Friday, 8 AP Statistics students in 2 groups of 4 attended the first annual High School Statistics Challenge competition at Temple, and it was organized by the Fox School of Business. One Myth Acton team placed first, winning $100 each, and the other Myth Acton team placed third, winning $50 each. This weekend, the Myth Acton History Bowl team went to Washington, D.C. and competed in the National History Bowl. The 9th and 10th grade team finished 4th in the nation out of 125 teams. They beat teams from Washington, California, Oregon, New York, New Jersey, and Texas. And finally, there is a palpable excitement in the high school with prom this Friday, and the theme is A Night in Venice.
Thank you very much. It's always good to hear all of our students doing so well and excelling. Now on to the communications.
So I'll try not to embarrass myself when I read about these projects, but 2 Myth Acton High School students, Cheyenne Farmand and Karthik Yagnesh, recently competed at the International Science and Engineering Fair in Phoenix, Arizona. They were invited to attend that fair and flew out there, all expenses paid. Cheyenne earned a gold medal for his project, Novel TOIC Inhibitors, Computer-Aided Drug Discovery for MDR, in the Medicine and Health category, and Karthik won the bronze for his project in the Math category, Co-Sheaf Constructions in Networks and Persistent Homology. Cheyenne and Karthik currently hold the prestigious recognition of having the 1st and 3rd ranked science research projects in the Delaware Valley, as well as being only 2 among 3 representatives from Montgomery County in the International Fair. The spring
Angela, can you go into detail on those projects, please?
I would love to. Homology, I'm not familiar with, but the spring concert season schedule is also up on our website, and we invite everyone from the public to please find their way to at least one spring concert. Very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 items. This Friday, the 17th annual Myth Acton post-prom event will take place at the Myth Acton High School. Prom night is one of the most important yet dangerous nights of the year for students. This all-night event, planned and funded entirely by volunteers working with the post-prom committee, is a hallmark for events of this kind. We invite our entire community to see it for themselves during the annual community walkthrough event between the hours of 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. this Friday, April 29th. As you also may be aware, lights were recently installed on both the Myth Acton High School stadium and auxiliary fields. Having recently successfully completed all necessary inspections, we are excited to invite the community to join us, as one of the remaining girls and boys lacrosse games have been scheduled to be played under the lights. These games will be played on the auxiliary field and will begin at approximately 7:15 p.m., following the junior varsity game at 5:30. The dates for the events are May 2nd, Methacton High School Boys Lacrosse versus Souderton, May 3rd, Methacton High School Boys Lacrosse versus Phoenixville, and May 4th, Methacton High School Girls Lacrosse versus Owen J. Roberts. Please join us for those events if your schedule permits. Lastly, I will be advertising a special meeting of the board for May 2nd, 2016 at 7 p.m. to consider actions on the matter pertaining to the school budget for the 2016-2017 school year. This was as a request by the board at the last work session in April, so that we could have a meeting that would primarily focus on the discussion around the board and assist the administration in determining the direction as we progress through the May and June schedule, preparing the Act 1 budget. That ends my report.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the public comment for the board action items. Before we start that, the one thing I wanted to say is we've been letting people speak freely up at the podium without really any time considerations. While our policy is 3 minutes, given that we only have a few people come up, we aren't going to hold people strict to 3 minutes, but we're going to ask that people respectfully try to keep it to a 4 to 5 minute range. And in the event that we ever do have a lot of people that come up, then we'll move to the 3 minute policy in that situation. But since we have low numbers, if we can try to keep it to the 4 to 5 minute range, we'd appreciate that. All right, anybody want to come up for the public comment on the action items?
Suzanne Andrews, Lower Providence. You have under the personnel items a new job called Supervisor of Professional Learning and Continuous Improvement. And I was wondering what precisely that person would be doing that would be a full-time position.
The position was established back in, I believe, June or July of 2015. The job description was approved by the Board of School Directors at that time, and it predominantly addresses two main areas of need within the district. The first area of need in the district is to coordinate and to direct the professional development of employees within the school district. And the second component of the job is to assist our technology department and our instructional leaders with utilizing data to help drive instructional decisions.
All right, thank you.
Any other?
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I have a couple of questions about the list of bills that I hope I get an answer to. On the list of bills, the first 14 items on the list that have check numbers have zero amounts next to them. And one of the bills was for a gas bill at Arcola, one for electric bill, and it has zero. If these checks were voided, shouldn't it say void? So when the public is looking at the list of bills, we know why first 14 lines are zero? Is there a reason for that?
Our software system, when there's either a misfeed or a void, something that would cause those checks to be zeroed out, that's the way our software system lists them on there. It does not put a specific reference to void on there as you're indicating. It would zero it out. And as I say, there could be a number of reasons why those checks would be zeroed out.
Okay. Thank you. Then I saw two bills for a New York City trip. One was for $4,600 for bus, another for $1,200, and I don't remember any New York City bus trips. I mean, this is a lot of money for a day. I imagine a day trip to New York. I mean, I'm just curious why it was that amount, which I don't remember seeing anything in the agenda in November or December for that. Another question, there's a Carly Oberman Law Office, and I'm not asking for the specifics. I'm just curious what an EH settlement is for $44,000. I mean, if it was a little, I don't know any specifics about the lawsuit. I just want to know what the term means, EH settlement. That's what it says in the list of bills.
That is a special education settlement, and when we reference settlement, we will reference a child in a way that does not disclose who that individual child is, but what you're referencing is the child involved in that particular special education settlement.
I had a pretty good idea but the EH settlement, the description is what threw me a little bit, because I didn't recognize the law firm, and I know it wasn't one that the board had hired.
We would never name, for obvious reasons, the student involved in it.
That I understand totally.
Ms. Alabak, you had a question before that about the New York trips. Do you want a response to that? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
If you're willing to give me one, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I can communicate that with you in an email, because I don't know what it is. It's likely a student trip, but the specifics around the student trip, like when it was and any particulars, I don't have that, but it likely references a student trip. Would you want more information on that then?
Yes, I would like it, when you have the time.
Then I'll communicate that with you.
Okay. You have, I think it's AVAM Soft Corporation for document scanning and shredding for $20,000. Not to be flip, but you could have taken the shredding to Mike Verb last weekend and had it done for free. I mean, could you explain that?
There's actually two different services. One, we do scan, digitally archive our special education materials simply due to the volume and lack of storage space. We also do have shredding services throughout the district. We coordinate that periodically throughout all the buildings. Vendor comes, picks up the materials, and shreds it, provides the district with proof of shredding as required, and that's what pertains to that service.
So instead of doing it, continuously, just do it all at one time?
It depends upon the amount of material and, as I say, coordination. We obviously want to maximize the value of bringing the vendor out. So we will set up times conducive to all the buildings getting their materials together for the purposes of shredding so that we maximize the value of having the vendor come out.
Okay. I'm just curious about the Molly Country Kennels that the school district paid $273 for a dog trainer.
It's under the community education program.
Okay. I wasn't sure, but I was under the impression years ago they're usually paid by the people that take the class.
They do, but we pay a fee for that, and then we get reimbursed through the fees from the participants.
Oh, okay. And just hoping that you get enough people in the training class to do it.
Well, right. We only allow courses to run that will cover the cost of the course.
Okay. I mean, just it looked a little out of place. All of a sudden, you see a payment for a dog trainer, and I thought maybe they brought in a dog for the high school during the day.
You're right. That's unusual, but it's.
Okay. You have Hyman assessment training for $3,600. Can you explain the assessment training? I mean, I know if people do assessments, usually they're pretty well qualified and they've been doing it for a long year.
Yeah, we have our Title II program, which is a federal funding, provides professional development for our staff. We utilize that grant funding to provide the professional development. One in which you referenced there on the bill list was part of Title II funds used for that particular professional development.
Okay. And I just have one more question. Since you're raising the price of the lunches, what is the percentages of students that actually buy the school lunches now? I mean, is the increase in lunches have to make up for the students that aren't any longer buying?
We'll get back to you with that, as well as the trip to New York, the New York stuff. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? John?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I have just a few items. On the list of bills, there's a number of people who are reimbursed for going to a conference, and the conference was described or identified with these initials, P, E, T, E, and C. I'm curious what conference that is, if there are words to go with the acronym.
It's the Pennsylvania Educational Technology and Conference. I think that's pretty good. Pete and C. Yeah, I know it sounds odd, but it was two organizations that probably about 7 years ago merged to form this annual conference. It's a statewide event, help funded through the Pennsylvania Department of Education.
Sure. With regard to the Chromebooks, that's on the agenda for vote this evening, and I guess I have a lot of questions about that, and overall, my bottom line is that I favor Chromebooks, but I think there's a substantial expense or leasing cost or procurement cost there, and there'll be a substantial impact on the educational program. So I think it needs more detailing. Whether that's a week or a month, I don't know, but and part of where I'm coming from is that people who stare at computer screens all day end up with vision problems, kind of like people working a keyboard all day get carpal tunnel syndrome. And it was unclear as to which one of the Acer model Chromebooks would be procured. They come in screen sizes from 11 to 17 inches. There are additional costs that were not mentioned. One of them would be for some kind of a soft cover to protect the item from damage when it's hit something, the ground or whatever. I think the 3-year lease needs to be justified from a number of angles. I was at a annual meeting yesterday for a local small bank, and they said their big profit center is leases to businesses, which I think could include leases to school districts. So if these banks have that as their biggest moneymaker, is leasing the right way for us to go? With regard to a lease, I think the 3-year lease needs to be justified. I mentioned last week that the school year is 180 days. It's not 365 days. So these Chromebooks don't get as heavy usage or strain on the battery as Chromebooks that would be used on a daily basis. It'd be interesting to know what the least cost would be if it were over a 4-year period. It would be interesting to know what the cost would be if at the end of the lease the student could purchase it rather than the leaseholder taking it and wholesaling it off to someone else. And I think importantly, we need more detail on how the Chromebook would be used in our classrooms, not just that other school districts show that they're beneficial. They've only been on the market for 3 years, but I think computer items, whether they're iPhones or iPads or PCs, now are going on 30 years or so of maturity. So, and then the Chromebooks use memory in the cloud. So I think that more thought needs to be given to the substantial cost involved, and more thought needs to be given to exactly how would they be used. For instance, if
Mr. Andrews,
I'll finish up. Just
thank you.
If class material is put on the Chromebook and it's for a grade 10 student, maybe the Chromebook should go to next year's grade 10 student rather than the cost of that software having to be re-upped again. So, and lastly, relative to the enrollment projection item that may be on the agenda, I'd say go for it. There are two potential vendors. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Joe Bickelman, Audubon. I have a concern about under personnel items A, number 2, accept the resignation of Stuart Whiteleather, Chief Financial Officer. It says effective on or before June 30th. I would hope that, I don't know why before June 30th is there. I don't know what the situation is, but we're in a pretty busy time for the budget and a pretty important time for the budget, and there's a lot going on there. I would hope that, Mr. Whiteleather wouldn't leave the district in a bind there, approving him for before June 30th. Also, Mr. Whiteleather is being hired at the Nazareth School District, and I went to their website, and he was approved to work 20 days there between now and the end of the year. So, during this busy time, Mr. Whiteleather is obligated to work 20 days at Nazareth School District. And I imagine he's going to be taking vacation days, but it's just that it's so busy here and there's a lot of responsibilities with the budget. I think, that should be a concern of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just a technology question. $48, is that per student or 48 a family?
Under the item for the technology fee, that's $48 per student.
What happens if you have like 4 kids?
It's $48 times 4.
Okay, moving along to approving the board minutes. So we're going to approve the board minutes for the work session on March 15th of this year and the regular board meeting on March 22nd. May I have a motion to approve the board minutes? Second? Okay. Any comments from the board? All right, all those in favor? 9. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to fiscal items. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills and the treasurer's report? First, do I have a second? Second. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills and the treasurer? Any comments from the board? I apologize. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. Bid summary. Approve the 2016-27 bid summary attached. May I have a motion to approve the bid summary as presented? Second. Any comments from the board? Michael?
Just real quickly, it doesn't necessarily have to do with who we're choosing for the bids here, but I did notice that some of the schools, if you look at the total costs, generally are around $14,000, $15,000 or so, but Eagleville is substantially higher. I was just curious, have they been held back recently and they're just trying to catch up, or I was curious on why their bid amount was so much higher for this year.
Over the last few years, where we've taken a concerted effort to utilize any stored resources and use those to a point where we would then be in a position to replenish those. Just through the process of using those, this building that you reference has a greater need this year versus the others, but it's not necessarily due to any one item in particular. It's more of just making sure that we're using the supplies we have on hand before we start ordering additional.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, with this list of bids, I think I saw an ICU, a Montgomery County ICU, similar that we were sent a copy of for their year, and they had many of the same suppliers. Are we doing consortium buys with those suppliers across the district with these suppliers, or are they all just bid per district?
Primarily, we do our own bidding. Some of the challenges that you run into, especially with consortium-wide bidding, and I'll use art as an example, there's very specific items that you would want or need within the classroom instructional area, and sometimes when you get involved with larger consortiums, there's more difficulty to get specific items for the Methacton School District versus what's used more globally throughout the rest of the participants. So by utilizing our own bidding process, we've been effective in securing very, very competitive pricing for our materials throughout the district across, custodial to art to phys ed supplies throughout the district.
How do we know? If you don't have any,
We look at the pricing that is secured through the IU, compare that to what pricing we're getting here through our bidding. If we see consistent anomalies, meaning either high or lows, we delve into that a little further, see what's going on, and if we have an opportunity to achieve greater savings through utilizing another means of securing one or more items, we will do that. Okay. And that's an ongoing process that we utilize.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Let's move on to D, the school board and lunch prices. Breakfast and... Maybe I should put on my reading glasses, huh? School breakfast and lunch prices, item D. May I have a motion to approve the school breakfast and lunch prices as presented? Second. Any comments from the board? Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. Now let's move on to the MCIU district cost plan. Approve the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit District Cost Plan in the amount of $539,946.80 for the 2016-2017 school year. May I have a motion to approve the district cost plan? Do I have a second? Any comments from the board?
Just one.
Sure.
What's the cost from this year to next, the proposed one versus last year?
I'll have to research that and get back to you. I don't have that information right here in front of me, but I can provide that to you.
I believe it was actually a decrease, but not a lot, but it was a decrease. But we can do that. We can certainly get that to the board, but I can tell you that it's a decrease.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comment? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Item F, the daily substitute rate. We talked about that earlier. Approve the increase of the daily substitute rate. The new rates will be $95 per day for days 1 through 25, and for service beyond 25 days, the new rate will be $105, and this is effective for the 2016-17 school year. May I have a motion to approve the... do I have a second? Any comments from the board?
Is that a $10 increase to what we're currently paying?
It's $10 per each tier. So there's 2 tiers. The first tier is currently at 85. We're recommending to 95. The second tier is at 95, and we're recommending 105.
Where does that put us in the county as far as high and low on the schedule?
I think Mr. Ryan mentioned that in his minutes from the meeting. I think that puts us right in line with the average. Would that be accurate?
That's correct.
Thank you.
The way that the tier system works right now, the way I understand it, is even if a teacher reaches the second tier at the end of a school year, they start over again at the beginning of the subsequent year. I guess this is a question for Mr. Harney. Is this standard? Is this something that we have room to negotiate with STS, or is that just the way that it is?
The tier rules and anything we do is really our doing. STS puts their charges on top of that. It's always just how we've done it. That topic actually never came up, a year-to-year discussion, how we do that, but it is always a fresh start every year. We really didn't talk about that, to be honest.
No more comments? Okay. All those in favor? Excellent. All right, moving right along. We move right on to Mr. Harney and the personnel items.
Yes, we have 2 resignations administrative for you this evening. Mrs. Lou Page, principal of Arcola Middle School, and Mr. Stuart White-Leather, our chief financial officer. We have 3 resignations classified for you this evening. We have 1 employment long-term substitute classified. We have 3 change of status administrative for you this evening. We have 1 change of status professional. We have 2 compensated leave professional this evening, 1 uncompensated leave professional, 2 uncompensated leave classifieds this evening, and 6 supplemental contracts. We also are asking your approval for 3 additions to our classified substitute list and the attached list of volunteers as provided. And we also have 2 job descriptions this evening.
Can we break out A separately from the rest?
A?
Yeah, just A.
Chris, also G, please.
Okay, let's start with, why don't we start with those 2 then? Item number A, resignation administrative. May I have a motion to approve that? Second. Comment?
Yes. Mr. Bickelman had a good point. I noticed that when I read it earlier today, and I just want to have some kind of idea, is there a date in between there that is going to be his last day, or I'd feel more comfortable knowing that the last day is the last day and when it is. That's...
Yeah, the wording of the item is such that it allows me as superintendent to make a recommendation to the board based on my assurance that we complete the things that I feel are necessary for him to complete prior to the June 30 timeline. And therefore, it also allows me to make a recommendation to have it occur sooner than the actual June 30th deadline if we so do not need his particular services. But I want you to know that predominantly my need for this position at this time is associated with the preparation and the finalization of the budget. And while you have my commitment, you also have Mr. White-Leather's commitment to getting that completed for us for the next fiscal year.
I guess he has another job already. I mean, and if he wants to leave, he can leave, and it's just a matter of how he leaves here. But is there any? If he did, I guess I just want to be assured that this is that you're very comfortable with this. That's all, and that we don't get.
Yeah, so as a result of this, it's typically you would take other precautions. We have plans in place to address the matter if, in fact, it were to, be earlier than June 30th, but certainly I don't have an expectation other than what's been delivered here on the paper, as well as knowing that I need to bring a budget and an adopted budget before this board.
Any
So I can tell you that I'm comfortable with what we have planned for the transition.
Is there any repercussions to him if he left earlier than what you would like? In other words, if after we voted on this, tomorrow he calls you up and says, I'm done, is there any repercussions to him for doing that, where you weren't ready? I mean, that's all.
I believe there's a professional standard associated with anyone giving a resignation and anyone taking a job in a similar field, and therefore I wouldn't expect his professionalism to be any different than it is today.
Agreed.
Chris?
Yeah.
Just on item 10A1, on Mrs. Page's resignation, the date is curious, of August 31st. So is there a transition period, or she's not on the job today? So I'm concerned about our COLA during the summer months.
We are working right now. We have an advertisement in the newspaper for seeking a principal to lead the Arcola building. We want to get that person in place as soon as possible in preparation for the next school year. So the advertisement includes on or before July 1 of 2016 is what we've advertised.
Are you okay, Paul? Okay. Any other questions? Brenda?
Just a comment on the item number 2 there. I know the professionalism that is displayed in this work, and I know we're focused on the budget, but I do want just to comment, without trying to be a micromanager by any means, that preparation for the audit is also essential to be done at this time.
Well, certainly, there's a lot that occurs in the business office. That's why we've also have an advertisement out for a director of business services at just about the same time as the principal advertisement was released. And while that is occurring, we also know that internally we have a strong department that can help us through that process, as well as if we find that we need some additional assistance, I will be back to the board to seek your approval to have some interim assistance if needed. But I'm not prepared at this time to make that recommendation. Likely when we find ourselves closer to the middle of May, and as we start seeing the types of candidates that are applying for such a position, I may be more inclined to make some additional requests in the interim.
Any other comment?
Just one comment to Stuart. I'd love to vote against your resignation. And on a personal note, it's been very nice having you along with the board. Back prior to your employment here, I would ask for a forecast, a 5-year forecast, and what the budget would look like, and give us trends, and they could not produce it. And that was one of the first things we asked you to do, and you did it. Not just a 2-year, but a 5-year. And good luck in your endeavors.
Any other comments? All right. All those in favor? Thank you. Now moving on to G. May I have a motion to approve personnel item G? Second. Any comments? No.
Maybe I didn't need to split it out. I just wanted to make a comment that the community might question the principles of moving principals. I think there's a benefit for new life into elementary schools or any school to have change and force change into a particular school. So I'm supportive of the movement of the principals because of the principle of getting new life and new views and new I mean, no puns intended here, but new values and new opportunities for change and improvement and make everybody a little more accountable along the way. So I'm supporting this, and I just wanted to be on the record for why.
Okay. So those are the principles I'm principling. All right. All those in favor? All right, thank you. So may I have a motion to approve all the other items, less A and G? Second. Any comments? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to, get myself caught back up here, onto the curriculum and programs of Dr. Katona.
Okay, for your approval are textbook adoptions for our new AP European History course, for an iLearn course for certification for students. These are 2 textbooks for that course. Also for Math and Focus for our K-4 students beginning next year. Glencoe Course 2, Glencoe Math Accelerated, Glencoe Course 3. These would be for grades 7 and 8. These textbooks have been on display in the Farina Center for the past month, and we have had 5 people in all who have come in to review several of the Math and Focus books for the different grade levels, as well as the Glencoe Accelerated and Course 3. Only one comment was left from someone who had spoken with me as well as with Mrs. Golden, saying that she appreciated the conversation and thought that the program looked very valuable.
All right, thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the textbook adoptions? Second? All right, any comments? Okay, all those in favor? Great. Now on to policy with Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Mr. President. For your vote this evening, under 12B for second reading, we have several policies, 103.1, 122.1, 137.1, 140.1, and 142 for your approval. Also, for first reading, you have several policies listed under 12A.
Thank you. Regarding the first readings, if you have any recommendations on the first reading policies, please send them to the board secretary by May 2nd for discussion at the May work session. Moving on to the second readings, may I have a motion to approve the policies presented under the second? Do I have a second? Okay. Any comments? All right. All those in favor? Okay. Moving on, Dr. Zerbe.
Under gifts and donations, accept a gift of Wonder Workshop Dash and Dot Robot Wonder Pack and from DonorsChoose.org, the Library of Skyview, Upper Elementary Center, the value of $279.99. Item 2, accept a gift of $1,000 from Ruth Hulling for the snack program at Skyview Upper Elementary. Accept a gift of craft activities from Jamie and Julie Kraus for the backpack program, a value of $100. Accept a gift of 2 violins from Doris Grubb for the orchestra at the high school, and a gift of $300. Accept gifts of $24,486 and $12,120 from the Methacton Football Parents Club for the purchase of new helmets and uniforms for the Methacton High School football team. Accept a gift of $500 from Kohl's Department Store for the Methacton High School mini-thon. Accept a gift of $10,500 from the Education Foundation, $1,529.82 from the Education Foundation, and $999.99 from the Education Foundation. And then bless you. In addition to that, under item B, there's trips. Approve the Spanish exchange program for Methacton High School for the students for Spain for February 16th through March 4th. The costs are paid by the students. And I ask that we approve those first before I go into the next 2 items.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to accept the gifts and donations as presented? Second. Any comments? All those in favor? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the trips? For trip, thank you. Second. Any comments? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Now move on to the enrollment vendor.
So the enrollment vendor, just for clarification, if the board determines that they want to accept my recommendation, we'll have to allow before the vote, courtesy of the floor. Okay. All right. Let me just give me a second. So just for a little bit of background, we issued an RFP and received 2 vendor responses, which my consolidation committee reviewed and determined that their methodology presented for student enrollment was far too similar to that of the Pell study and essentially would not suffice for our current needs. I directed the committee to contact vendors that were solicited during the RFP process that were more closely aligned with what we were attempting to accomplish based on the reports that we were able to find from those vendors online. We chose to reach out to 2 vendors, Montgomery County Planning Commission and Mylone and McBroom, and we held conversations with both and received their rationale for why they did not originally respond to the RFP and how they utilized their methodology to support student enrollment projections. I had 2 of my committee members present at the April 2016 work session of the board. I provided the documents that I received from both vendors in a memo on April 22nd to the board, and this evening I have a recommendation. It is my recommendation that we utilize the Montgomery County Planning Commission, we'll call it MCPC, at a cost of $12,240 for the initial enrollment study and for 2 additional years of enrollment reporting. So essentially that breaks down to an initial study of $8,670 with 2 subsequent studies of approximately $1,700 each. In order to consider engaging the Montgomery County Planning Commission, the board must choose from what I believe to be 2 options before we progress forward. And what I mean by that is, if we approve, and I'll consider this, say, option A, if we approve my recommendation, the Montgomery County Planning Commission, they indicate that they can start work as early as September 2016 with a final report to the board and public in December of 2016. Using the Montgomery County Planning Commission will adjust our original timeline by 6 months. I'm referring to the timeline that I presented several months ago before we started the RFP process. If the Montgomery County Planning Commission is the approved vendor and given the adjustment of the timeline that I've mentioned, a final decision inclusive of capacity, redrawing of attendance areas, and the communication of a potential school closure could likely be finalized in June or July of 2017. This timeline adjustment will allow for a decision by the board at that time, but an implementation to occur not before the start of the 2018-2019 school year. That's given the fact if all the data comes back and suggests that a school closure or the board determines that a school closure is necessary. So let me sum that up again. The option is if we choose Montgomery County Planning Commission, because they can't start within what we want our timeline because of other studies they're doing for other Montgomery County school districts, our timeline gets shifted by 6 months. And if you recall, my timeline included many components, not only a look at capacity, but an engagement of a potential redrawing of boundary lines vendor, and that, public meetings were held, and we would take our time to necessarily include every aspect of the community in that decision-making process. But because they're not able to start work on an enrollment study until later, September of 2016, that adjusts our timeline. The second option, and one for your consideration this evening, is given the enrollment report will not be provided until December 2016, it may be appropriate for the board to consider other work on this matter of enrollment and consolidation occur out of the original timeline sequence. So what I mean by that is we could have work in tandem with the work on the enrollment report occur. Given the enrollment report of the current enrollment of our elementary schools, we have some schools that have enrollment of about 418 students, and we have other buildings that have enrollment of 289 students, or about 130 student difference. And there's some disparity among our other buildings. So while this disparity exists among our elementary schools, it in turn places, unnecessary burdens on programs and services. And so the board may want to consider engaging a redrawing of attendance area vendor earlier than originally planned, inclusive of redrawing of boundaries with and without the potential of school closures, meaning that there has been, conversation at board meetings about, well, if a building is not determined or needed to be closed, there may be some determination that a redistricting would better balance our buildings to allow for services to be provided more amicably to our families. So with that said, I think that by doing some additional work in tandem, given the fact that Montgomery County Planning Commission can only start in September and can only deliver a report by December on enrollment, it might be helpful for the board to at least have all the information by doing this other report and get it on par with the original January 2017 timeline. So those are the things I want you to consider. There may be other options that board members might think of, but when I'm looking at this from the perspective of here was the timeline that we originally thought was a good timeline, and because the vendor that my committee has looked at and that I've looked at and we're recommending is probably going to be the best for the district in terms of cost, in terms of long-term a commitment and a long-term relationship, and has the experience and is a vendor that's being used by many of our other colleagues in Montgomery County for a similar purpose, some purposes being for studies to build buildings and other purposes for studies to potentially look at redistricting. I think Montgomery County Planning Commission makes the most sense. Unfortunately, it puts a wrinkle into our original timeline. And so I need you to consider those things, and before we take a vote, I would want to get direction from you that if we're taking a vote and we're going to do either option A, which is no, that we'll deal with the matter in June or July of 2017, 6 months delayed, or we want to direct me to start the engagement of a redrawing of attendance area committee, and also start looking at capacity and other items so that we can hopefully land in January with all the information you may want. So those are the things on the table for consideration. I'll take any questions, and then if if we reach a conclusion this evening, I'll put the, we'll word this motion correctly and allow for public comment and then take a vote.
Dave, our Pell study, that's, what, 2 years old now? Has their numbers reflected what our current numbers are? Are we higher or lower than what they projected? That's my first of one question.
I believe that our current enrollment as of October, I think it's fair to compare the October 1 enrollments because that's typically what we've been doing and that's what the report's been doing. The October 1 enrollment for 2015, October 1, was lower than what, by about 50 students than what Pell had projected.
So you would have to say that their numbers were probably proper on a decline, showing that we were going to drop off on students. Would you say their assessment was, or their numbers were correct, or would you say that they didn't anticipate enough students?
Well, I mean, they anticipated a decline, which we kind of anticipated as well. I mean, the matter for us is probably not the short term. We can probably predict that as I have in some of the reports I've provided the board myself. I guess the real dilemma is, the methodology and the second 5 years is where, I don't have that expertise, and I think that's what's been the larger question. But to answer your question, I mean, there were 50 students less than what Pell had projected. So while they projected a decrease, I mean, it wasn't spot on, but it certainly was in the right, I guess, vicinity.
Okay. Seeing the history of it, I'd be very comfortable with looking at utilization study, the redistricting study, considering by the time, if we start 6 months from now in the Montgomery County Planning Commission or their study, by the time we get through that study, by the time we go through the process of a decision whether or not we're going to close the school, we should get all that work done. Also, back when we first started talking about redistricting and closing school, there was a possibility of 2 schools. And the conversations were that was too early for 2 schools, but in 3 to 5 years from the day we were first looking at closing the first school, that a second school would probably be right in line for also being closed because of enrollment. So with these studies, and now that we're 2 years further down the road, I would say we should be looking at it so we only go through the process at once. It doesn't mean that we have to close 2 schools, but the data, everything needs to be looked at and compiled, and you might as well look at it as a whole picture, because we'll just start going through this. As soon as we're done this process, we're going to pick it up a year, maybe 2 years, we'll say at best, and go through the process again. And that's not good for the community. It's not good for the school district, teachers. So if we're going to look at this, we should be looking at it as the whole picture, not piecemeal as we go.
Well, if I could just comment, I think one thing that you said that really struck me is, while every school district needs to continue looking at their enrollment annually, certainly something they need to be aware of and in control of that data. I think your comment about having, the conversation about potential school closures being an annual conversation is difficult for the community. And it's difficult for me as a superintendent, my administration, and certainly as members and leaders of the community as you as well. So While I'd like to tell you what the right answer is on this, I know that Montgomery County Planning Commission is probably the best solution. That's why I'm recommending him, but there's a dilemma, and the dilemma is time. And I need your thoughts.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Pell is no longer a part of this conversation. I mean, the whole reason that we have this on the agenda this evening is because we decided as a board that we weren't comfortable with the Pell study. Am I correct? I mean, so Pell is no longer... Okay, so really the only issue here is whether or not we're going to go forward with Malona McBroom or the Montgomery County Planning Commission, and then whether or not we want to do a redrawing of boundaries at the same time, or if we want to continue with the original timeline. My concern...
The adjusted original timeline.
Correct.
The sequence.
With the 6 months added in there. My concern or question, I guess, is if we're going to look at redrawing of boundaries in tandem, is the plan to implement the redrawing of boundaries at the same time as a potential school closure? In other words, we're not going to redraw boundaries one year and then possibly be facing a school closure, because we can't have students switching schools more than that. I mean, that once is going to be enough.
I think I understand your question, and here's what I would suggest. What we would do is while we're waiting for the Montgomery County Planning Commission to do their work, we would engage a vendor to start the process of gathering the data and creating options for the board to consider into the future about redistricting with a building closure, without a building closure, whatever other options we want to throw out. There might be multiple others. So I think that it's a matter of we can meet in January, or basically December or January, with a report on enrollment from Montgomery County Planning Commission. And if that, at that time, suggests that, we should, or it's recommended that we should close a building, you could then use the information or the data from the redistricting plans or options to consider what might be done for the 17-18 school year. Does that make sense? So I think in the original timeline, I was suggesting that we shouldn't make a decision any later than January 15th of that given year for a future year. I still do believe that, but the problem is, we have this other time issue, because we want to give our staff and our students and our parents enough time to make a proper transition. So the only potential way to meet that would be to do some of these reports in tandem, and not to make a decision until we have all the information in front of us. And essentially, if we were to wait and do the sequence like we originally planned, we would end up in January with the same information. Does that make sense? We would have someone lead that process, gather the data, present you some plans with what the potential options are with or without a potential school closure. And we can certainly talk into more detail with that, and I'm certain the board has some more input they want to give me on what that vendor would look like. But in principle, I think it's good for us to have that conversation so that I know how we're going to go forward.
Okay, I just wanted to make it clear that the redistricting would occur. If there's a school closure, it would occur at the same time. So we wouldn't be redistricting one year and then looking at consolidation the next year. Basically, I'm looking at it as there's two options. We can redraw the boundaries and consolidate in 1 year, or we can redraw the boundaries but not look at consolidation again for at least another 5 years so the same students aren't impacted.
I hear what you're saying, but I think that would mean that we would predetermine what the information is in December and January. And while I think that generally is a good thought that you're making, I can't predict what the information will say, and therefore we may be sitting with information in front of us that suggests just what you may not want to see happen right now. Does that make sense? I mean, there might be a way to transition a building through a closure rather than a straight closure. You might be able to redistrict over a 2-year period. You might be able to do something like that. I'm not the expert in that. I just want you to know that I don't want to mislead anybody to think that once, we need to wait for the data. We need to wait for the experts to bring that information forward. And does that make sense?
Let me add something here. So the recommendation is to go with MCPC, and if I put on my professional hat, that's my recommendation too, based on reviewing a lot of different companies. If we were doing our normal schedule and we could start today, we could get the results from NCPC, and it's either going to say your enrollment's either going to trend up over time and there's no need for school closure, and we can hand that to the redistricting, because we all agree that we have a significant imbalance at our elementary schools that need to be addressed anyways. So that has to be addressed. So in the ideal situation, we would get the enrollment projections and hand it off to the redistricting company and say, go at it based on this scenario. But because of our timing, that we want to address that redistricting as soon as possible, ideally next year, because the longer we have it sit this way, and Brenda's one of the biggest champions of this, is, it's really unfair to the children, the unbalance there. So we're trying to keep that in mind to try to get that redistricting as soon as possible. And the wild card there is the enrollment going to continue to decline, or is it going to go back up? So we're taking a slightly different approach here, is where we're saying to the redistricting company, work on a couple different scenarios, and we'll tell you in the end which one we want to go with, because right now we don't know if the data is going to show we have to close the school because the enrollment's going to continue to go down, or if it's going to come back because the recession's gone and the economy's booming. So now we're kind of doing things in tandem or in parallel as opposed to sequential. So, the two options that Dr. Zerbe was expressing is, do we keep that sequential approach, which pushes everything out to another year and keeps the imbalance down at the elementary schools in there for another year, or do we try to pull things in and do them in parallel? And, we're hopeful and somewhat confident that it will work out, that we can still make a decision, the end decision, around the same time frame that we had hoped we had. Okay.
If I can chime in here on this, when we started the whole process of consolidation, one of the things that was clear to me right from the beginning was the need for redistricting. And no matter when we do it, it's going to be painful, it's going to be hard, it's going to really, it's a tough thing to do. Quite frankly, I think that option B is probably a very good thing to do, because you have, while you're waiting for the MCPC study to be done, you can get the redistricting work going. And based on what we have now on the buildings, it's quite evident that we need to work on this. Now, it doesn't say that we have to approve anything, but at least the work is started. We know we're going to have some kind of picture of what's going to be done and what's going to need to be done. I just think that it's something that we really need to do and get working on that.
Yeah, I have a couple things. I guess first off, it looks like it says that we've got a 4-month slip, but the dates from September to December, but we're saying it's going to cause a 6-month delay. So why isn't it month to month equal? I guess what other efficiencies are...
Yeah. I'm going through my detailed report here. So what happens is, on the original timeline, we were to approve an enrollment projections vendor in April of 2016. In May, we were to implement the core communications plan, and by June of 2016, we were presenting the second enrollment study to the board in public. So we were presenting the study in June based on the RFP process and the results that we received from previous vendors that said that they needed 2 months to turn around a proposal. And so that's what we used as a basis for the timeline. In this case, not only is MCP not able to start in April or even in May with work, they're not starting till September. and they're not going to be able to deliver a final report until December-ish. So when I went through the timeline, a report in June was originally the piece and sequence, but now it's going to be December. So that's about 6 months.
And the other supplier could start when?
The other supplier could start, I believe, in May.
Okay, so they could probably come pretty close to meeting
They could,
the time frame
but they could.
at an additional price, I understand.
There is a different price, like substantially.
But the price of that difference versus making sure we have the information going into next year's budget planning process is a night and day.
That is
20,000
accurate.
versus whatever, $1 million.
Well, it's 30, yeah, right now, the difference would be 33,000 versus 12,000
So 20,000
something.
difference.
Yeah.
Versus-
And then that's only for 1 year. The 12,000 is actually, for Montgomery County Planning Commission, it's about $8,600 for the one study, and then about $1,700 for each of the next 2 years. And those prices are in line with some of the others that we recently received back. As I mentioned earlier in my summary, we received pricing from 2 other vendors. One was in the $8,000 range, and the other one was in the $19,000 range. And I think those are closer to, what Montgomery County Planning Commission is suggesting.
Right, I'm just trying to trade off the time value of money and getting it done sooner. And, I've got some concerns about starting the redistricting process without all the information, albeit it's a good idea. I guess my second piece of concern is, if I remember correctly from our work session, the Montgomery Planning Commission is a one-man show.
I believe that's what one of the individuals from my committee mentioned.
Right.
I do not have confirmation of that.
Okay. I mean, because obviously there's great concern if it's a one-person show. What happens if he gets ill? What happens if he quits? What happens if the county says, we've got something more important for you to work on? I've got concern that this gets delayed and delayed and delayed again. So, I mean, for the delta in price, and maybe we can go back to M&M on price, because I think this is higher than what they originally came to us earlier this year or late last year. But I think there's some risk potentially with Montgomery County if it is a one-person show, and I think that's what we got reported to us. It was one person only.
That was reported by one of my committee persons. Yeah, that's accurate. But I can't tell you that is actually a fact. I don't know the
That's
the
pretty
staffing.
important.
I don't know the
From my
staffing.
perspective, that's pretty important to know.
Understood. And there's certainly risk in that relationship with Montgomery County Planning Commission, as there would be risk with working with a vendor, how many thousands of miles away.
Yeah, but at least they have a bench.
I can't speak to their staffing right now, but I can say last year I talked to 3 separate people there that were involved with it, related to previous work that was done. So at least in 2015, they had multiple people that had their hands into it there. But I haven't looked at it recently.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what was reported. It was a one-person show, I think. Right, John?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So to me, that's just a risk that I'm not sure is worth the trade-off from a time perspective. That's all I have.
Any other comments, Brent?
Yeah, I have to agree with Scott on that, and also you throw in the political end in our backyard. I'd feel more comfortable with someone outside our county or even state. And when you only have one per individual, that's an issue that a variable that I'd like to take out of the equation here, where we're not second guessing whether, if you remember back when we did the lights, we had Mark Jonas was representing the people against our field project, and he was the chair of the Montgomery County Plan Commission. So there's issues there that I'd just rather get away from, and you get what you pay for. if you're getting a cheap deal, but you're only getting one guy that's working on it, that's an issue for me. I'd rather have something out of county, the state, that's fine, but it has a bench, as Scott has said. The other thing, just looking at the feasibility study here at some of the summaries, the potential 2 schools that we spoke about with the former board, they're talking about $11 million, $12 million worth of renovations and repairs over the next 0 to 5 years. The longer this process takes us, it means the more money that we put into these buildings, which also says in this summary that one school, you add another 28%, you could build a new school. The other school is 35% more, and you have a new building. They're citing different things like 1975 wiring systems and different updates. So just to even tackle our comprehensive plan on capital improvements to these buildings, I don't think delays in this process is a good thing financially for the district, along with the unsettling in the district. So I think if the vendor outside the county can get this done sooner than later, and we can talk to them about bringing their number down, negotiate that number a little better, I'm all for it. And if we can have that by May 2nd special meeting, maybe we can table this until then and vote on it with some more information.
One comment. If you ask me professionally about these 2 companies, I think they can both do a good job. I do think MCPC has some interesting twist on things from an approach, but will it make enormous differences? I can't tell. But, personally, from a professional statistician, I think they both can do a good job.
So I think time is of the essence as well. I would be concerned if it is a one-person operation, as Scott and Jim have expressed, because you have no backup in that situation. The idea of doing the redrawing of attendance areas during the fall of 2016 is very attractive to me, because it gives us the opportunity to either change the locations of the schools that the children are going to in the following school year without waiting any longer than that, whether or not we have 5 elementary schools or 4 elementary schools in that year. I think that we continue to do a disservice to some of those children who are in very large classes, and the longer we do that, the worse it is for them. So, to me, speed is of the essence. I would like, I think Jim's suggestion of seeing if we could have more information for May 2nd, I don't imagine that since that's next week, that would be harmful to the process of being able to select a vendor, unless that's not correct, Dr. Zerbe, unless you need to know right away.
My recommendation will setting us back another couple days before we make a decision. Should not hurt the timeline.
Okay, so we will have enough information presumably about both vendors, and we can have, if we decide to go with the MCPC, I would certainly recommend that we do this double duty project. I'm assuming that doing it in both options, whether we have 5 elementary schools or 4 elementary schools, is not a significant difference in cost. But maybe we could know that too next week.
One thing I will say, if we're of the belief that it's either going to be the Montgomery County Planning Commission or Malone and McBroom, please know that if we use Montgomery County Planning Commission, they only do enrollment projections. They would not have a service to do redistricting. However, as you recall from a previous conversation, Mylone and McBroom have both the enrollment projections and can do the redistricting. So one other consideration that I would bring forward is if it is still attractive for us to do this simultaneously, and Mylone and McBroom seems to be becomes the vendor of choice, you also could have an option to do both of those services with Mylone and McBroom primarily in tandem and sequence them up. So would you, I guess what I'm saying is, would you like me, while I'm getting more information, to also find out what that cost would be for them to do both of those services? Does that make sense?
Yep. Either together or if you decide to
A package deal, or, yeah, I would say give me that for free. But once again, you get what you pay for, so, you don't want that rushed.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be efficient with our conversation and the information that you need. So is there anything else that I need to provide for you to help you make a decision if I can bring this forward to you for May 2nd?
Just clarification of their backup plan and some reassurances, since we all do live in the land of the Arcola Bridge, some reassurances of a timeline, a definitive end date,
Just
barring any, major emergencies.
Just so we can be as efficient as possible on May 2nd. So the two options that we're going to get information on is going with M&M, breaking out the price, trying to bring down the price on the enrollment projection study separately, and then the bundled price of going with both. The other is that we go with MCPC, but option B, where we do things in parallel, because we got to get it done. We aren't going to have, for May 2nd, any other cost options on the redistricting than what M&M gives us. So we really won't have a discussion around redistricting vendors at that meeting, just to be clear, so that, when we get there, we know what we're going to be talking about. Okay? Good.
Just one final question. If we end up using Montgomery County Planning Commission, are those is that information going to also work with M&M as far as doing any attendance line adjustments? I mean, is there any incompatibility on how they look at the numbers?
The numbers are pretty standard in terms of the reports, at least all the ones I've looked at. The enrollment projections are all similar formats, and they all go out 5 and 10 years, and then they break it down by schools and things like that. So that part of it should be pretty standard as an input into the redistricting.
The only thing I always worry about is, just like any kind of warranty that gets voided, if we don't use their numbers, do they not take responsibility, or do they void their warranty for?
It's like trying to bring somebody else's MR to your new doctor, right? They say, oh, we got to redo all those. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. We'll table this item, and then there's another comment.
Sorry, just to clarify, since we're talking about things for the next meeting, is to contact MCPC to see if it is a one-man shop. Do they have any concerns? They've been pretty honest with us about their timeline and everything. So just a discussion around, what we talked about this evening. Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is the one-to-one digital learning initiative. There are two motions for your approval this evening. It's to approve the administration to establish a one-to-one learning environment for students in grades 7 through 12 to be phased in over 3 school years, beginning with the 2016-17 school year, at a projected annual lease cost per year as follows. Projected leasing cost for 2016-17 is $260,000, 17-18 is $238,000, and 18-19 is $237,000. The second motion is a motion that we had significant conversation about at the work session, and that is, and so that has been adjusted based on a review administratively and based on some feedback that we felt was had at the work session. So it's now we're suggesting that the administration be approved to establish a technology fee annually per student in grades 7 through 12 who are issued one-to-one learning environment devices by the district and who choose to utilize that district-provided device outside of the school day. The regular fee is $48 annually, and this is where the adjustment is. At the work session, we had $24. The new motion reads $0 for students that qualify under the National School Lunch Program for reduced and free-priced meals. And I just want to make a clarification. There was a comment from the public that we are also putting a cap on the technology fee. So after 2 students, it is capped. So it will be 2 times 48, not 4 for that particular family you were speaking of. So those are the 2 motions, and any comments? Oh, and one other item, there were several other questions. Mr. Sosnovic prepared responses to all those questions that we were able to field from the work session. We provided them in a memo to the board. If there's any additional questions, he or I will be glad to answer them.
I just wanted to reiterate a couple things from the presentation that people may have forgotten, or there was a couple public comments, that things had been adjusted. I feel, although there's never a perfect world, that the pilot was done very, very thoroughly, and that 170 students using the Chromebooks in 4 different subject areas throughout 4 different grades was about as complete as you can get in education. I don't know about as complete, but I felt very comfortable as the education chair with the pilot. And as far as the lease that came up, again, in a perfect world, something is utilized 365 days a year, but with 180 school days plus weekends, it is utilized quite a lot. And with the concern of children being on the device all day long, there's never going to be a child on there all day long throughout school because there are other ways to teach. So again, just wanted to reiterate how pleased I am, and thank you to the board for bringing up the issue with the free and reduced lunch children, and thank you for capping it at 2 as a parent of multiples.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve?
Hold on.
Oh.
Not done yet. I understand the program, very well, and I understand it. And I made comments at the work session regarding the technology fee of $48 per child. But I want to go back for a real quick question, and only because I've just been thinking about this. I know in the budget we have a $1 million line item for the leases, correct? So the 2016-17 budget, your $260,000 is a projected lease cost, which is over 25% of that $1 million budget line. Now, so you're telling me that, so in other words, what is the remaining balance of that $1 million budget line, less all our other leases? Do you have an idea what that may be?
The amount that is referenced there, that's the cost of the equipment to lease, is that amount divided by 3. As a rough number, we haven't secured the leasing as of yet.
Right.
Generally, just as a ballpark, you divide all those numbers by 3 to determine what the annual lease amount is.
Okay, so then we are basically, I want to know basically, is this a wash with the annual replacement of the desktops and laptops throughout the district that would be normally in the classrooms?
It's actually a cost improvement over the current program and replacement schedule that we have in effect now.
Okay. Do we have that amount of money of how much we're saving by doing this?
I don't have that in front of me to reference that number. The differential between what we're spending now and what this program would cost, what the annual savings would be.
Mr. Sosnovit, happen to have...
I'm sorry to blindside you on this, but I'm just trying to think through this as we go.
They're fine questions. We presented a lot of this at the meeting, but I don't have the information.
Yeah, we talked about this at the last meeting, Mr. Roth, and what we were projecting for the high school and Arcola desktop and notebook replacements over the next 3 years to be roughly $690,000. I believe that's the number that I mentioned to the board at the work session. If you would take those 3 lease amounts that is on the resolution and add those together, that would give you the total, and then you could, ascertain what the projected differential would be at that.
So it actually would probably, so 690,000 over 3 years, correct?
Yeah, but you got to take into consideration too, with the technology fee, there would be an additional savings.
That's my point. I don't believe that we should be charging our families $48 to take these things home. I understand skin in the game and ownership and all that. But with the savings, if we have it, if it's to me, if it's a flat wash, then it's a no-brainer, you do it. But if we're now going to say that to implement this program, take the technology fee out is going to cost more than what we're doing now, then I think as a budgetary sense, we have to look at this tighter, okay? I understand the understanding of what districts are doing around us about implementing a fee. I don't agree with it, especially given this day and age with how much technology is at home. I know some families share computers, others don't. I also would like to know what the process will be for students who do not elect to take the Chromebooks home with them.
Sure, there will be designated areas set up in each of the buildings. For the high school, it would be in the library. In addition, it would probably be in the same area in Arcola. We would, in essence, allow them to obtain their item in the beginning of the day, and prior to dismissal, they would then return that item.
So they'll have enough time to, if they get off the bus, go into the library, sign out their Chromebook, and then get into homeroom.
It's not necessarily a sign out. We'd end up having, there would be a designated spot labeled with that student, and we designed that procedure. Ms. Landis and I are working toward what that would look like and who would manage it and all of that.
I just do not want any child to be disenfranchised in any way, shape, or form, and having to book it from one end of the school building to the other to make the bell when they have to go sign out one of these Chromebooks. That's why I have a major issue with this. I think you're inviting problems. I think you're inviting issues. For $48 a year per kid with a cap of 2 kids, and to Ms. Albuck's point, you had 4 kids. Okay, well, now it's just 2. I don't think it's a good idea. The other part is, and I know this from experience with a freshman now in the high school, getting on the bus, released from the class, now they're going to have to go to a drop-off, the Chromebook at the end of the day, and make the bus in time.
Right. To your point too, because it's still early in the design of the whole procedures moving forward, we would look to do multiple, designated areas for that if that still was a problem. But understood your point.
Did you guys do any work to figure out a way to eliminate the fee? I see where you've taken the reduced lunch out of the equation, which is fine.
Yeah, if we eliminate the fee, the cost assumed to the district would be that lease, in essence, divided by 3 to whatever interest rate projected. I have my Excel sheet open. I could tell you what that is if you would like.
No, you basically it would be about $37,000 to $40,000, maybe a little bit more than what you're doing now. Because you have $690,000, as stated before, and those 3 leases are, what, 246?
It's $45,000.
$45,000 over 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, in essence, the year 1 lease would be 92. 177, and then year 3 would be 260. And I believe that was also communicated on the slide as what the total was in my presentation. So in essence, we're just picking up the total amount for the annual payment.
Right, so is the math correct then? We're talking $45,000 over 3 years increase if we do not implement the technology fee.
Hold on, I got to do something. If we do not implement the technology fee, 1 second. At $48 with the current proposal with free and reduced being 0?
Correct.
I could provide it to you. It's just...
Well, here's the question, Mr. Roth. I think regardless of the number you're seeking at this point in time, I think your point is, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to assure the board that if we can do the program within the budget without the technology fee. We said that at the work session, and we're saying that again this evening. The technology fee, while we believe it's important and we want you to act on that, and you can vote for that or you can vote against it, the technology fee does a number of things as well as help defray some of the cost. So the fundamental principle that we need to determine here this evening is whether or not we believe that we want to have some buy-in from our student participants, and we want to have the families that are associated with this program help defray the cost if they take the device home, or not. I mean, that's really the what we need to determine, because we can provide the program, and we can provide the program within the budget.
I do have that number, Dr. Zerbe. It's projected in 3 years. We would save $172,000, approximately, if we would implement the $48 technology fee. However, I said approximately because there's no way for me to project multiple students, because there's now a cap that we're going to introduce, so that number would probably be lower, I would suspect. But if there were no students that had siblings in the program and they were all unique, families, we could estimate about $170,000 in technology fee in 3 years that I presented.
Okay, so then you're at a little shy of $60,000 a year in costs. Okay, that's over 3 years. That's the savings you would have by instituting the technology fee. But I mean, it looks like here that your technology fees are going to be what, $92,000? Is that over 3 years in your 18-19?
The technology is
85.
Yeah. So the technology fee for year 1 was projected at $92,000, and that was calculated by the following. In essence, what we did was, misspoke, that was the rolling lease payment. The technology fee was calculated at $30,000 now, with 0 participation in the free and reduced lunch, and that was calculated by taking what our expected participation rate of 90% and multiplying that by the anticipated student count, and then looking at our free and reduced population within that student body, and then multiplying the fee, which equated to about, rounding it up, approximately $30,000 if we don't subscribe to any free and reduced lunch students. Again, that's not considering and capping at multiple students.
And then, then the second and third year, second year, 58,000.
That's accurate. Third year would be 80, 85.
Right.
Maybe I appreciate your input, or questions, Mr. Roth. When I left the meeting last week, I thought to myself, my sixth graders that I teach just paid $50 to go to Hershey Park. That does not even include lunch. I just paid $14 per twin to go to the Philadelphia Zoo with school. I just paid $20-some for my fourth grader to go to the art museum and another field trip, all of which I'm happy to do. And as part of the discussion, I'm only one parent, but for my children to understand that they are using this, and it is a great tool, I would even probably put it in as a lesson for my children, you need to pay for half of this. I'm still comfortable just with the technology fee. The other part is a lot of times board members will bring up other taxpayers that don't have children. So for those taxpayers, I think to myself, well, here, those are children in the district taking, or their families taking some of the burden away from the taxpayer that doesn't have children. So I, again, just want to reiterate, I'm okay for the instrument. I try to be budget conscious, but I made the mistake of renting my child's violin. Now, that's voluntary, but I wish I would have looked harder at yard sales, and that's what I'm going to do this summer versus renting it. But I just think the value of this, and I understand we don't want to preclude anyone from using it or hurting children who choose not to participate in dropping it off, but we've seen it work, so.
How about to move things along here, how about we take a separate vote on line item 1 and line item 2, and we'll let it fall out the way it does.
That'd be perfect.
Okay?
I still must understand something. And Andrea, you hit on my point, is that every time something new like this is thrown into the district, where we offer something there's another fee to the parents of the children that are being used for this. Now, I understand this is an optional fee, but they will not have to take these things home. Okay, some may elect to do that, some may not. I just don't think that at the level of education that we are trying to have here at Methacton, that we can come up with a better system than this. If they want to take the Chromebooks home over the summer, maybe charge the fee, okay? But during the school year, I don't think that should be done. And I understand the procedures for the damage and having some responsibility. Change that plan. Institute a replacement plan and say, hey, here's what's going to happen if you break it. Then hit them with a fee that's double that, or something like that. But make them, by signing them up for that and signing that device out, that is the way to do it, but not by blanketly charging our students and generating $85,000 in 1 year in fees. And I definitely will break this out, please. Thank you.
Okay. So, if we do item 1, the approve the administration, I'll put on my reading.
I think that's a good question.
Well, we can have comments after we do the motion for each one. We can do additional comments for each of those, okay? The first one is to approve the administration to establish a one-on-one learning environment for the students. May I have a motion to approve that? Second. Now, any comments related to number 1?
I have a comment. The amounts that are listed here, $260,000, $238,000, and $237,000, I think from the conversation, that suggests that that is not actually the amount that would be spent in those specific years. Is that correct? I think you said that if we...
No, that's accurate. What's listed is accurate. Year one would be approximately 260. Year two, we would have to go out for lease of 238, and then the subsequent year, it's approximately 237. And I base those numbers off our October 1st rolling projections.
Mr. Whiteweather?
That's the cost of the equipment. The lease would be basically one-third of that amount. So each year would be an add-on, 260 plus 238, and then plus 237, but all of those costs would be divided out over the 3 years of the lease. So this is the cost of the equipment, but the lease is a mechanism of what we're going to get the rate and annual payment, which would be derived post your approval this evening, if that is the way we decide.
So the leasing rates, so the actual lease cost to the district would be one-third of those amounts?
Yeah, and I provided that at the work session slide.
Correct. I remember seeing those.
Right, so my concern is that the motion that we're talking about talks about us, and the way I see it is our cost for 2016-17 is $260,000, and that's not really our cost that year. It is far less than that. It's $92,000 or whatever. It is the amount of gross lease that we would have for that year, I think, which is not a cost for that year. That's my concern.
But in terms of a lease, you're obligated to, your obligation is for the full length of the term. So we can, I mean, if it pleases the board to reword the motion, then we can certainly do that, but I think that it's worded reasonably.
Yes, and I would suggest that we would just say projected gross lease for 2016 is 260. That would be fine.
So we just add the projected gross?
Gross lease, and take out the word cost.
Okay. Is there any other member of the board in adverse to that recommendation? Okay, so would that be currently the motion on the floor then? This motion with the gross lease with cost removed?
So I am offering an amendment to the motion to say projected gross lease for 2016-17, $260,000 and on with those numbers.
I have an additional comment. We talked when you made the presentation last week about the warranty and working on a pooled warranty. Were you able to further those discussions with the vendor at all?
Yeah, I did approach the vendor with that, which in turn he has to talk to his higher-ups to see what that would look like, but that is what we're striving for.
Okay, and then I thought Mr. Andrews had a good comment earlier about a 4-year lease. It seems like it might make sense to take a look at those numbers. I don't know if we've done that, but...
We have the devices that we are going to be putting out on lease, which are the Chromebooks. All vendors that we worked with in deciding on which model to bring forward suggest that you are not going to get a 4th year out of those Chromebooks. And in fact, they do not, when you try to extend the warranty to a 4th year, it increases substantially because of the failure rate they expect, because students have these devices typically 365 for those 3 years, and what they've seen relative to device and hardware failures in that 4th year, their recommendation is that you stick to a 3-year lease with the Chromebooks.
Just because of the life cycle?
Yeah, because of the maturity of the device in terms of, new models coming out, in addition to the wear and tear that students will impose on these devices.
Okay, and then lastly, I think we still need some work on a bring your own device. I know you made some comments, Dr. Zerbe, about that in your response to us, but I'm still not there because...
I was in a conversation with our attorney. I missed the first part.
No, I just said the bring your own device cessation after 3 years. I think that still needs some work and some discussion. While I understand some of your comments that you sent back to us, it still could provide a savings to the district if people opt out and have a device.
I agree with your statement in terms that we could save us money, but in the flip side of that, I think the research that Mr. Sosnovich has done indicates that it provides a consistent and reliable education environment. So we're not dealing with the quote-unquote technology. We're dealing with the learning process. Everybody's got the same boot up time. You come in, the teacher has an expectation. The teacher has an expectation of what is going to occur, and the students have the same expectation as well. But I do agree that the BYOD, I mean, we're not abandoning BYOD. We're leveraging this opportunity for our students to drive this process forward, and we just appreciate your support on this matter. But it doesn't, any of these technologies and any of these options don't go away just because we're implementing this process. We may find that there's a better methodology 2-3 years in down the road. And so, like for example, we may implement the technology fee today, or we may decide to implement it a couple of years from now. So that's really your decision. We try to provide you with the information, and hopefully, we can, move to a vote on both of these items.
Any other comment on item 1? So can you read it with the...
Frank, could you just read it?
Sure. Thank you. Approve the administration to establish a one-to-one learning environment for students in grades 7 through 12 to be phased in over 3 school years, beginning with the 2016-2017 school year, at a projected annual leasing cost per year as follows. Projected gross lease for 2016-17, $260,000, 217-218, $238,000, and 2018-2019, $237,000.
All right, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. Now,
Was he unanimous?
it was unanimous. Okay. Now moving on to item number 2, talking about the fees.
Get a motion in a second.
May I have a motion to approve item number 2? Do I have a second? Any comments?
Yep. One last comment, and then I promise I won't go. So, in conferring with Mr. Whitelarder here, basically, if we did the cost, the lease cost, the gross lease cost over the 3 years is approximately $45,000 more than the replacement cost of the computer systems that we were looking at, which is $690. So that's $15,000 a year cost. That's going to cost the district more money, $15,000 a year more, okay? The technology fee will generate $172,000. So basically, we're actually making money on this deal through the technology fee. So I don't see that to be a correct thing, okay? And I think that if we can't find $15,000 a year in our $100 million plus budget to make up the difference of this, got more problems than we know.
So I admit I'm naive about how things are done at the high school level, but I know at the elementary and up to the middle school level, if there is a family hardship, I know that there are families who fall well between the affluent and those who qualify for the free and reduced lunch. And there are families who the $48 fee would be a hardship, but they're not on the free and reduced lunch program. At all the schools that I've experienced so far in the district, Home and School is available to help out with these things. There are various programs available for families in need. And my experience thus far, I'm confident that if a family had a hardship, that the $48 or the, $96 that they would end up having to pay, if it was a hardship for them, that there would be avenues for them to pursue, to have that fee taken care of so that no family, no student is left feeling disenfranchised by the program.
So I am very conflicted about this. On the one hand, I see the value of establishing the fee, but I also heard Mr. Roth's comments about the difficulty of students being able to retrieve and dispose of their device at the end of the day. And I wonder if it's more trouble than it's worth to set up a program of that sort. So I'm conflicted.
And I guess I'm conflicted, and we're going to have the budget meeting on the 2nd, because we were talking about taking $1,000 per elementary school for various supplies. So when Mr. Ross says it shouldn't be hard to find $15,000, I understand his point, but then I also think, at my school, they just told me no more 3x5 cards. So I just worry about what gets cut that we don't know, whether it's a conference. So that's why I was in favor of the technology fee. And to Kim's point, and you bring up a very good point with my Hershey Park example, we check all the kids, and when someone hasn't turned it in, and we know they're not a free and reduced lunch, we do ask, and we have the means to take care of that. That's in my classroom. I realize that, but I did want to reiterate.
I think Brenda hit the word of the day is conflicted. I go back and forth on this one myself for the principles of what's right for the education of the children, and it's interesting that I guess what we're trying to resolve here with the $48 here is what problem are we trying to resolve? If we take the money out of it, we're trying to protect the equipment or try to get to the root problem we're trying to resolve. So if we took the money out of the equation, is there another way to solve the problem for skin in the game or something along the way that really resolves this issue so that we get the best of both worlds? Because it does seem ridiculous that in some ways we're asking them to more or less pay for a school book. And it's sort of a slippery slope when you think about the long-term projections of that. So I don't know, Troy, if you even want to answer that question, but the other districts that have gone through this and experienced it, what are the pros and cons for not having something, and then the whole logistics, to the point of logistically going to the library seems astronomical if you have a 30% miss on participation and you have 135 kids running into the library at 2:30. So
like I mentioned before, and then when I was asked last week what I could expect as a participation rate, and I said a number in the high 90%, and that is based on what I've seen in other schools. Now, to start, like I mentioned before, there was a higher non-adoption rate, but that's just because parents didn't get the word or did not sign up or what have you, but as the program became established, that percentage was really high. In addition, because that percentage was so high, the logistics of what you're describing in terms of 135 students or what have you running around trying to, drop these off and pick them up become no longer relevant. But the other point I wanted to mention is that I heard what you said, and I just wanted to reiterate a point that was made during the work session, that as part of this, we'll try to find every support possible if this fee was adopted to help families that fall within that range of affluent and not qualifying for school lunch. Again, one of those avenues might be the Education Foundation. That seems to be a great avenue that most districts tap in terms of helping families of that, with this program that they have established. And that would be my next piece after, depending on the decision here, to try to facilitate every support possible to help families of that need.
Jim. Yeah, I guess if it's free, would there be more people using it? It's just like a bowl of candy sitting there. When it's free candy, people tend to grab a handful of candy and go. If it was 50 cents a piece, they might not buy any, or they might only buy one. Just to Andrea's point with the violin, if there's a rental fee, we'll say, they might say, well, the inconvenience factor, the fee, I'll go get my own instead of renting it. The other is, if there's no rental fee, maybe all of a sudden we have double the amount of people wanting to use it because it's free. In 3 years, it's junk. They don't have to worry about the replacement cost, nothing. The other thing that Andrea had that was very important is, what's this money going to pull away from? I know this money's going towards the books, the Chromebooks, but what other technology things is this helping to finance? Or if we don't charge anything, where are we going to take the money from? Is it the 3x5 cards? Is it paper towels, pencils, etc.? So they're buying into this, and it's something that...
I just want to make a statement. Superintendent, I sometimes, put items on the agenda, and after getting your feedback, need to think I probably shouldn't have put the item on the agenda. And here's why I'm talking about this evening. This particular matter, you brought up some very good points, and particularly the piece that bothers me the most is that the problem we're trying to solve for may create some unintentional consequences that we may not be prepared for at this moment in time. And while we want Mr. Sosnovic and the rest of our administration to be successful with the implementation of this program, we don't want something like this technology fee that, according to our conversation this evening, to get in the way of our potential success. And while I think administratively we do believe that some skin in the game is important, I think it's more important that the initial implementation of this program goes without a hitch, because it'll set the foundation for years to come. And with that, I'm recommending at this point that we table the matter of a technology fee, allow the administration to move forward with the implementation of the program, and we revisit this potentially in a future year. Yeah.
Is this program, is this something that's required by the state, or can we just not do this program at all? And so, I mean, the other alternative, if we're worried about cost to the district, do we have to even do this program to save all the money? I'd rather give the program to the...
We just voted to let them go.
I understand. But as far as when we're talking about charging this fee, when we don't charge these fees, the other alternative is you don't do those programs that require that equipment. And then nobody has to pay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to table this motion.
Do we have a second? All in favor? All right. Good
Thank
idea,
you.
Brenda.
Thank you for your input on this matter. Okay, let's move on with the agenda.
That's me. The next item up is dates for the board members. What's not listed here, and we've talked about several times, is a special board meeting May 2nd regarding budget items. Also, if we're very efficient with that meeting, we will all be near the lighted fields and might be able to catch the end of the, is it a lacrosse game that night?
It is, yes.
Well, we'll see how efficient we are. The other dates, May 11th, Finance Committee, May 16th, Education Committee, May 17th, the Policy Committee, and the Board Work Session, May 23rd, the Property Committee, and then May 24th, the Board Meeting. The meeting dates and times reflect some changes to the Finance Committee and the Property Committee. In addition to beginning in June, the Education Committee will be meeting on the first Monday of the month at 6:30, and there will be an alternative date of the second if the Monday is a holiday. And that's it. Old business. Do we have any old business to bring up?
Yes. As far as the budget, it's probably been about 6 months ago when the board voted not to take any exceptions and keep the budget under Act 1. As far as our May 2nd meeting, what information does Dave need to go forward? Because I'd have to surmise that the board hasn't given Dave any direction where to go with the budget for us to have this May 2nd meeting. And I'd like to know from Dave, is there something that you're missing from the board that we have to give you a decision on May 2nd to get this budget finalized and get it off our plate?
Well, for May 2nd, I'm not looking for a finalization. The finalization occurs in June. But what I will be doing is I'll be presenting some motions that I would like you to either approve or not approve. And those motions will include those matters that have been adding up to decisions that we need to make. For example, do we increase the pay-to-play activity fee? How do we address the SRO program? So I'll be seeking your input and your authorization to make those determinations, which will then give me the guidance based on your approval of those individual items, where we actually stand, so that I can take that forward to the Finance Committee on the 11th and continue working towards a final proposed budget for the May meeting. Prior to our final at the end of June. So while I don't have the direction yet, I'll be seeking that direction through specific motions of the board on May 2nd.
Would you be able to put in our packet what that motion would look like and your recommendation? So that's what we can ponder and consider until May 2nd. So when we have that meeting, if we've had any individual questions to you, we can ask it, and then we don't have to talk for 3 hours about one motion, and we can get it done. So, because we have the information.
Yeah, we plan, as we typically do for our board meetings, because it's a vote, it would be a voting meeting. While we're not voting on the final budget, we're voting on items that are associated with the final budget, and we'll be advertising 72 hours in advance. So it'll be all those motions will be on the agenda for the May 2nd meeting.
What your recommendation?
Well, the recommendations will be the motions. I'll be seeking approval on certain items, so those are the recommendations.
Just to clarify, Jim, I'm not sure if I misheard. 6 months ago, the previous board gave a direction of not seeking exceptions in the November. The December board voted to, I think it was January, we actually voted to possibly use the exceptions, just from a clarity perspective. So the current board gave that direction back in January to use all, to strive for the lowest possible tax increase possible, but just from a clarity perspective to make sure that it's understood of what this board has asked for back in January. The second thing is, along the way, almost every month, we've had discussions about board budget items. We have, along the way, been processing the different options, and Stuart has been showing us consistently the changes from month to month of what actions and what choices we have to make. The May 2nd meeting is related to being on the record of what actions you want to take, what choices you want to make around education, what choices you want to make around finances, what choices you want to make around technology, or whatever the specific items that Dr. Zerbe puts forward. I don't think this is really new from a process perspective. It's just a little more transparent for the community.
In regards to old business, is it the interest of the board to have the follow-up to the Methacton High School wrestling discussion? At the work session meeting, it was asked that we present a timeline. I have a timeline laid out in front of you, and so I guess the question, Mr. President, do you want me to talk about this? Is it appropriate? Okay. So as a result of the last meeting, I have a motion that I'm going to ask to be approved, which would require comments from the public. It would be approve the administration to work with the Methacton Wrestling Program in the solicitation of financial and in-kind contributions as determined under the provided timeline, and I'll read that, towards the construction of a wrestling facility. The timeline reads as follows. Beginning in April 2016, fundraising begins. April 2017, $1 million in total contributions committed, and at that time, formal drawings can be authorized. In November of 2017, $1.5 million in total contributions committed, bid specifications, authorization, and bid specifications sent to market, along with seek board authorization and award bids. In March of 2018, remaining contributions committed, based on the return of the bids, we'll have a better idea of what the amount of dollars actually will cost for construction compared to the original proposal of about $1.9 to $2 million. And construction would likely begin sometime about March of 2018 with a plan of use of the new facilities sometime in November of 2018. And this was prepared with myself and Mr. Maida, the wrestling coach, and his committee this afternoon. So it did not make the original agenda, but it was a request, and I just want to make sure that if the board's interested in giving me the authorization to work with the committee to start looking at raising funds for this project, meaning that you're not committing to the project at this moment in time, but you're allowing us to raise funds towards this project, I guess we would take any questions and possibly a motion on the matter.
If I'm reading this correctly, we're basically authorizing for the next year for the committee to go ahead and raise funds, no time taken from administration, and I mean no disrespect for that. I think it's great that the community is interested in doing this. I just know we have so much. I know you and your administration team have a lot of other things. So I just wanted to reiterate that for the first year, that we're authorizing just some fundraising.
We're just authorizing them to raise funds under the name of the Methacton School District. And I just want to be clear, there likely will be some time of mine to provide guidance and assistance as needed, but I made the commitment to them to do that, but not at the same level that I've done as part of the field contribution project. It's more of a guidance perspective than actually the person doing all the asking.
I'd be willing to make that motion.
Do you have a second for the motion? All those in favor? Sorry, comment.
I'm just being too
We had brief discussion last time about the continuing fundraising for the field project, which is not yet completed. And I do have a concern that it might be the same pockets to some extent that would contribute to this as well as to the field project. I think the district's obligation to raise as much money as it can for the field project is its first obligation before it does something like this. So I would like to have some more comfort that we definitely will be able to raise the rest of the money for the field project.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
Okay. So from the Capital Campaign Finance Committee, we recognize that approximately about $300,000 remains to be raised as part of our goal of $2 million. And with that, it's the committee's belief that with the future potential of advertising and selling signage and advertising on our fields, will be in a good position to raise that and possibly even more. But the committee is convinced that once we get the approval from the township, if we get and when we get the approval, we will likely be in a good position to finalize that remaining $300,000.
And you feel that fundraising going on for this project would not interfere with your ability to collect as much money as it might be available for the field project?
I don't believe that it will be a conflict. Based on the conversations that I've had, certainly there are some similar individuals that we've had contributions from, but they'll be reaching out to a different community in terms of wrestling alumni specifically, and they have targeted many other vendors that are associated with wrestling programs specifically that we haven't used as part of our field and capital campaign fundraising.
Thank you. And so my second concern is I have a little bit of experience with fundraising, haven't done it myself, but have supported it. And I have a concern that there would really be the ability to raise any significant money without a real plan as to exactly what it is. In other words, somebody who has, on an architectural basis, drawn plans or whatever, and it seems to me that we could at some point be asked to fund such a thing so that they could raise the money, and I have a concern about that.
Well, we provided as part of the presentation a plan done by an architect, AEM Architects, that outlines the skeleton of such a facility. There were three options provided to the committee. The second option was the committee recommendation, and as my recommendation, which gets us in the neighborhood of about a $1.9, almost $2 million fundraising effort to cover the costs associated with that. That's been provided to the board a while back. It was provided, but I think what you're referring to, as this timeline so suggests, is that formal drawings are authorized once we get to the point that we've raised $1 million, or this committee's raised $1 million, and that's when when those are formal documents, then they'll lead to additional bid specifications in coming months. So I think we have some reasonable drawings that were taken into consideration based on building codes, on the actual potential of this facility being constructed, and it gives us good guidance for this committee to raise money towards this project.
Okay, so on that same light, first of all, I'm a sports fan, okay? I was a wrestling mom, so I'm into wrestling.
I'll let you know where the contributions
Football, I was
are.
not so much for.
I'll let you know where to put your contribution.
But I would be reluctant to expose the district in any way to any amount of additional money to be spent on this, given the amount of money that we have had to spend for the field project, which is extraordinarily beyond what we expected to spend. If we have to spend additional money for anything, I would like it to go to Mrs. Katona's budget.
Okay, I'll go next. I agree with pretty much everything that Brenda just said. A lot of her concerns are shared by myself, and I probably have some more concerns in addition. Where we say 1 million in total contributions committed, are we saying pledged, basically? We're not saying in hand, we're saying that people have pledged that money.
I'm saying that, it would be a pledged amount because we don't have a formalized project, and it would be difficult to accept the money without being able to have a formalized project, so that is accurate.
Okay, so that would lead into my next thing. I know that for the field project, we've allowed people who have been interested in being, larger contributors to spread that amount over, 3 years, 4 years, however long we allow them to do it. But we talk about, getting $1 million here, $1.5 million by this date, and then the rest. How do we guarantee that we actually have all of that money in hand before we pay for this? Because it will come out of the district's funds if not all of it is actually in our hand and it's just committed or pledged.
Well, I think that's going to be a decision that we'll certainly need to consider. I think there's a couple ways to do that, but similar to the recent field construction project, we did take we took a bond on the Emmaus loan, and we used that money to substantiate the construction costs, which occurred over more months than I can imagine, but it was supposed to be 3 to 6 months, but essentially we're using those contributions and to pay ourselves back. And I would think that is certainly one option to consider in this process. But I think where we're at is the reality of this is whether or not we're able to have firm commitments in terms of pledges of the $1 million range. And at that point, I think that your question, as well as maybe other questions, need to be brought forward with some answers as to how it will unfold in the future. I think this is certainly, ambitious and very thoughtful. And I think from the comments at our work session, if we're able to get something generally for free in this could help the district, not only the district's wrestling program, but could open up some opportunities academically as well as, wellness-wise or whatever we turn that other space into. So I think what I'm asking is we need to get to the $1 million benchmark first. If that becomes a reality, I think there's a lot more questions that need to be answered and discussed.
Okay, and I get plenty more questions, sorry. We've heard that there's been a community member who is, highly interested in this. Or, this gets back to Brenda's question here. Are we going to start tapping into the same pockets? I mean, you mentioned that there's vendors and there's other people. I mean, have we gotten any, just in talking, how much these larger vendors are planning on giving? Because, I mean, I know how much work and, how much dedication the Education Foundation puts into doing everything. And I foresee in the future that they get wrapped into this. And we have another type of capital campaign to raise whatever we might not have gotten from others. And this probably won't make me the most popular person in the room, but we just went through a very large project along athletics. And I've heard mentioned before that, this is a win-win. If we don't have to pay for this, it's great for the district. But in my mind, it's another strong initiative that we're pushing forth, which is about athletics. And then we heard that, if this does get moved forward, that the existing wrestling room could be repurposed. And the first thing that was mentioned was a wellness facility. Well, then guess what? That's another thing which will be mostly utilized by athletes. So we're still benefiting the same group of people. And I just feel like I wish our next initiative in this district could be something which was solely based off of an educational outcome.
Well, you approved that this evening, thanks to the leadership of Mr. Sosnovit.
No, but I mean in terms of the public. If we get people and we're trying to raise money from the public, from these same people, I would prefer it not to be about sports and athletics again. And in terms of additional costs moving forward, there's two things. One, you mentioned the bond as a possible way of paying for this moving forward. That will be more increased costs above this, because guess what? If you go for a bond, you're going to have interest costs. So that will immediately bump up those costs. And if the board does go ahead with the wellness center, well, guess what? We're not going to put back in old, used athletic equipment into a brand-new wellness center. So then we're going to be talking about new athletic equipment and things of that nature. And I'm just thinking, I don't want to make a short-term thing by thinking this is perfect, this is a win-win if we can raise all the money without the school district paying for it. We have to think long-terms, and, like I said, it's probably not the most popular person in the room right now, and I can see that there's a lot of support on the board for it, but I felt that I'd be doing a disjustice if I didn't mention my points.
I think your comments are appropriate. I just want you to know that when large donors want to determine where to put their money, they determine that. And if I come to them with a technology program to donate to, or a new set of textbooks, they may not be inclined to do so. And so I think all I'm suggesting is, while there certainly are, you made good points as well as other members of the board, I think it's important that we allow this group an opportunity to see if they can, in fact, raise the funds necessary to bring us to an April 2017 discussion about how we really move this thing forward, if at all. At that point, we may decide that, it's not possible. I don't know. I can't predict that. But what I can predict is, if we stagnate the energy of some of our community members from potentially raising funds for this project, could stifle our program. It could do whatever, but it's not going to improve anything. And so all I'm asking is for the opportunity for the administration to work with this group. If they can get the commitments and we're comfortable a year from now, then we can continue moving forward. If not, we can put it to rest. I mean, I think that's the only fair thing that I can suggest to the board at this moment in time.
I have to say, most millionaires or billionaires, they don't donate to the books, they donate to the buildings. They like having names on buildings. They like things that last and people see forever. Right now, we have a network of people or groups that are fundraising, whether it's for the fields, whether it's for the wrestlers, whether it's for baseball fields. You have momentum. You have a certain demographic or a certain part of the community that's really putting this forward. That's free money to our budget. If they're willing to go out there and raise this money, we should not discourage it in any bit. We should not discourage it at all. And, I'm more than happy. Let them get to the $1 million. Let's see what they have, and then we start talking and we get the fine details of it and how it's going to go forward before we make the commitment. But we'll know by the community. If it takes them 5 years to raise $1 million of people committing their money, it's not popular and it's probably not going to happen. But if, by midsummer they have $1 million raised, we'll be talking about in the near future. And people have, there's people that like wrestling, there's people that like baseball, football, all different things. It doesn't mean they're going to not donate to something else because they're donating to wrestling.
Dr. Zerbe, just to clarify, the only reason this is before us is because they want to use our name, right?
Yes, they can't raise money without us giving the approval to raise money for this particular purpose.
Yeah.
Chris, if I may, a couple of things. One, I don't really look at this as free money in our budget because we did not have something in our budget at this point for, anything for a wrestling facility. So it's not really free money in the budget. I'm not comfortable with voting on this tonight. It's not something that was on the agenda coming into this evening, and I don't think that we'd be doing a disservice to the public if we were to vote on it, whether we get public comment or not. I mean, we've already seen the crowd thin out here tonight so far. People didn't even know at the onset of this meeting that this was something that was going to come up tonight, so I'm not comfortable voting on this evening. Secondly, I have some concerns overall in the district about the means by which we're doing our fundraising, particularly regarding the safety of our students. It's something I'm planning on bringing up at a policy level, but it's something that I thought was worth mentioning in the context of this discussion, particularly regarding ongoing car washes and things like that at the Park Ridge intersection. If that's something that would come up in the course of the fundraising for this type of a thing, it's something I'm not comfortable with, so it's my 2 cents.
Public comment on this?
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. When Coach Maida was here last week, did he make it clear that the wrestling team, the wrestling program, wanted to pay for this facility themselves? It would not cost the taxpayer a penny? Then what's the issue? It was a little bit of issue when Mascara wanted to redo the ball field, the baseball field that they paid almost $270,000 for. This is a gift. And I resent the fact that you have an issue with doing something for the wrestling team, but not the football team. That's millions of dollars sitting out there. 2 years ago, this room was full of wrestling parents when it looked like they were going to get rid of the coach. I don't think you want to see those parents in this room again. They're very passionate. It sounded like to me that Coach Maida had people lined up with a checkbook. And if he can raise $1 million in 6 months, I think what he needs is permission from the school district or the school board to raise this money. Give it to him. See where it goes. If there's any other things, I don't know if you're attaching anything else to it. I just got the impression he needs the permission from the school board to do this. Give it to him. I've been in the school district a very long time. Methacton is very well known for their wrestling program. And yeah, I understand. I mean, I like the comment, it doesn't have to do with education. There's a lot that goes on in the school district that doesn't have to do with education. Methacton is very well known for the wrestling program. They have won over the years. As a matter of fact, I think one of our gym teachers was one of the champion wrestlers, Billy Moser, who came out of Methacton. And that is the one sport that's going to be sidelined when you made sure you had all these fields for all the other sports in the school district. Now, I'm not a wrestling person, I'm not a football person, I like basketball. But wrestling, I have known the Harners from the Norristown School District Wrestling Program. Wrestling is a very good, determined, strict, it's a good sport. It keeps the kid focused. And Coach Maida is an excellent coach. But I think you would be remiss to throw him under the bus when the other programs have benefited in this school district. And like I said, I really don't think you want the wrestling parents to descend back into this room again. I saw what it was like 2 years ago, and there's 3 of the school board members that remember that. So I would, as a taxpayer that is looking at a project that is not going to cost us anything, like Mike said, it's a win-win. Right now, it's a win-win. See if he raises the money, then we move forward from there, and then other decisions can be made. But I think you should give him and the parents an opportunity to see how much is raised. I understand the football donations are tapped out, but this is a different sport, and just see where it takes them and see how, if we benefit. But I think you ought to allow Coach Maida and the parents to go out there and see how well they can do. And it will benefit the students that wrestle. They will benefit from this in the coming years.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comment?
Suzanne Andrews, Lower Providence. I beg to differ. I'm never sure when someone says something's going to cost you nothing. I've been told that too many times over the years, and ends up that there are costs that weren't mentioned. Also, I thought I heard at the beginning that it was going to be $1.9 million, which sounds to me more like $2 million, and we keep talking as if it was just $1 million. $2 million seems like the amount that they should be looking at and be truthful about when they're doing their fundraising. I'm wondering if it is legal for outside money such as that to actually build a structure or add a structure onto our building. Is this because the school district and the state, I would think, has regulations as to the sorts of additions that are made to their structures and where that funding comes from. So I would, again, wondering if that's legal. And then I'm thinking again about all of the other special interests in the district and in the school building. I mean, probably the art and music people would like to have another big, wonderful facility added on for whatever. We could have a really high-tech chemistry lab because we have all of these chemical companies around us that we should be turning out high-tech graduates from our school. The list might be endless as to how, if they say, well, I'll just raise my own money, we could have a really wonderful school building here with all of these extra rooms and so forth put on at no cost. I just would like you to think about that just a little bit. It's something we just heard about recently, and maybe they ought to do more of a sales job. I think we need to think about it a little longer.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comment?
Hi, Megan Fitzgerald Audubon. I was just wondering if there's any way that we could shift the fundraising to maybe cover the cost of the Chromebooks, kind of shift our emphasis. I think it's great to have a wrestling room and to promote the sports and everything, but we're going through this discussion about some kids not being able to afford the Chromebooks, and maybe if we could think about asking for some fundraising for them. So, just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is your hand up, Andrew?
I didn't know we were voting right now on this. Okay.
Yeah. So is your hand up or down?
It's down.
Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1, 2, 3. Abstain? 1. So it passes by 5-3-1.
If you could just mention for the record who were the ones voting in opposition and the ones abstaining.
Okay. We need to have a roll call vote then?
A roll call vote, and it's sufficient if you mention which people voted in which direction, just so the record has it.
Okay, let's do roll call vote. Andrea?
No.
Brenda?
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain.
Yes.
Yes. And yes for me.
We need to know why we're abstaining. Is that
No, she doesn't need to
No.
visit. If she has an actual conflict, then you have to announce that. But if you don't have an actual conflict, we're just speaking, you have a consent.
All right, moving along, let's try to wrap things up. Related to the board goals, I did send out a draft today. I wasn't expecting to have discussion or comment today. They are lengthy intentionally. We want to draw those back. So if over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I can ask everybody to give me your comments, either electronically or give me a call and give me your feedback. What I would like to do is then take the week before the next board meeting to digest that and come back to the board meeting with a set of goals that represents everybody's input, and hopefully vote on it there and finalize it at that meeting. So that's the timeline.
Chris, I just wanted to interject. Thank you very much for doing this. It's
Sure.
good to have something that we can chew on. Thank you.
Thanks, Herb. The other thing that's not under new business, but it's related to some of the public comment, since my industry that I work in is the pharmaceutical industry, I did contact the Merck Foundation this week and started discussions with them about trying to get us grant funding related to science, manufacturing, roboting, and other things. So there are other efforts going on. I don't know if I'll be successful, but I am pounding on those doors, and I know other people will be looking at other areas. Now the general,
As far as under new business, being that we were on the topic of wrestling, a couple people have talked to me about the baseball field as far as porta potties, and they wonder why we don't have actual structures. As far as, and I even saw in here, they complained about the pathway to the baseball field, and here it says that it's ADA, it's not sufficient as far as access. But if a group came and said, hey, we'd like to put the bathroom up, we'd like to put the path in, bleachers, and even light the field, would we as a board be opposed to somebody trying to fundraise for that?
I think if we're presented with that, we'd consider, I think anytime anybody wants to fundraise for us or donate money, we'd consider.
Okay, and just like Chromebooks, I mean, we're not stopping anybody to say, hey, I'm going to fundraise for Chromebooks so we can give everybody a Chromebook.
Correct. If people want to fund certain areas within our school district through donations, we'd certainly consider that. I don't see any problems with that.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Now the finale. May I have a motion to, courtesy of the floor. I'm trying to move things along. I apologize.
Candy Oliver, Eagleville. I missed it. The special meeting is May the 2nd. That's Monday night. The time, I missed the time. 7? Normal time. Okay, a couple things. About the fee for the Chromebooks, I've been in the school district a long time, and I volunteered in the school district as a parent. We have a large number of disenfranchised students. We may not see it. It might be behind the curtains. And I know we have programs, and a lot of parents will not step forward and ask for help because they are embarrassed. They're afraid of what will be said about them. I know from personal experience when my husband was laid off, my son was in high school, we applied for the free lunch program. It's not easy. You have to jump through hoops, and there are limits. If you make $1 more, you don't qualify. You can make $5 more. That still doesn't get your kid a free lunch program. But the fact is, we're looking at putting a fee on parents, but we have no problem with our snack backpack program to make sure kids have something to eat. And $48 may not sound like a lot. That could be milk, bread, eggs. That could be gas in the car for the parent to go to work. And I understand even if it's 2 children. And I know a lot of kids take trips, and a lot of parents save the money. They start at the beginning of the school year. I did when my husband was laid off. He was fortunate enough not to be laid off that long. But I did ask last month, what is the percentage of the kids that are on the school lunch? And I know it's gone up. So that means you have a lot of kids that won't have to pay the fee. This is something you have to look at seriously. We're not in the position now that we were in over 10 years ago in the school district. We have a lot of problems. Even the state lists, when they list the students, and one of the categories is economically disadvantaged. And I was stunned when I saw that. when I looked up the test scores, because they break it down into ethnic groups and whatever. And I know for years, Woodland and Eagleville, there was parents that are struggling. These are things you have to take into consideration when you slap on fees. And so I would think about this long and hard. Now, as far as the Chromebook, I've sat here and watched us get computers. They've come and gone. I watched us get iPads, which 32 of them were stolen when they broke into school. I've watched us get tablets. Now we're getting Chromebooks. What happened to all the other equipment? I mean, the school board spent $7,000 for Harry Potter books. We can't find them. I mean, I watched laptops on the board up here, and then I watched the iPads, and now you have tablets. So it's like the new shiny object. So what's it going to be next year? I mean, honestly, I don't know how I actually learned without technology. Children can learn without technology. It's really easy. You're a teacher, you can understand that. They'll learn. I give kids credit. They are smart. We have to give them the credit for being smart. But we just can't keep buying a new thing each time it shows up. My other question is, where does the Arcola boys baseball team practice? It was brought to my attention that they practice down at the Red Tail baseball field on Eagleville Road. My question is why? We have a ball field right in front of Arcola that thousands of dollars were spent to renovate when they built Skyview. Unfortunately, right now, and I brought this to the attention of the previous building maintenance director, that ball field is now used as a dog park because it has fence and gates. The ball field has never been maintained since they put it in. And I know during the summer, people will get a team or other outside teams have played there. But why are the Arcola boys going down the street to another ball field? And the reason it was brought to my attention is the parents down there are complaining because people are taking their dogs onto the field. And that's volunteers that take care of that field down there. It's a beautiful field. They have lights and everything. Why aren't our students utilizing the ball field that was raised and netting put in and fencing and gates and bleachers? Why are they going down the street? That's a pure waste of taxpayers' money. And also, when people take their dogs up there to run loose, that's a liability for the school district if someone gets bit or attacked. Now, I asked Mr. Jacoby about that, then he laughed. I mean, he laughed at me. He just said, I don't know.
I'm not certain where you're getting the information, but I was just at a game at the Arcola field this past week, and there was one just this week. It got rained out. They started the game, and they got in a couple innings, so they're playing, they're practicing there. I'm not saying they don't use other fields, but I don't understand.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm right down the street, and my daughter walks my dog around the school, and she has come home more than once during the summer and the weather's nice. That ball field, during the summer, I've lived there for over 25 years. The ball field's empty. It's sporadically used. The baseball season is not that long. And I've seen, especially on the weekends, I've watched my neighbors take their dogs up there and let them run loose in there because it's fenced in and it has a gate.
Would you please call me when that happens?
Sure, you want me to take a picture?
Yeah.
If I'm up there.
All right.
I'll tell my daughter, because my daughter walks the dog around, since it's such a long walk, she walks it around, and she's come home and said, last week she was up there was 5 people in there, their dogs were running around.
That's not the intent of the fields, as you know, but, you know, we don't have surveillance of all those fields 24/7, and we do put signage, and we're working to try to improve all of our fields on all of our campuses. But I appreciate you bringing that information.
Well, I mean,
to my
I put
attention.
signs, since my property butts right up to Skyview, I put signs on, my son put signs up that say, no trespassing. The signs are gone, they were taken down.
All right, we'll look into that.
So, yeah, that's what I just wanted to know. I mean, I brought this up before Jacoby. I mean, my concern is, it's a liability issue if someone gets hurt up there, even though it's a public place, and I don't think the taxpayers want to have to pay higher premiums for a dog bite. That can create a big problem.
All right, thank you.
So, thank you.
Any other public comment?
You're going to talk, right? We get to turn the light switch next week.
I'll be there.
Okay. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Just a couple things quick. There was an article recently in the paper, in the Times-Herald, about the U.S. News and World Report ranking of high schools from a year or two ago. They played up a local high school in Colonial School District and said they had 100 teachers there. And the current enrollment in that high school leads one to calculate a student-teacher ratio there of 14.7. I believe the similar ratio for Methacton is 12.8. And Plymouth Whitemarsh was ranked 24th, and Methacton was ranked 23rd. You know, about equal. You know, that supports my continued issue of losing enrollment at the high school, but as enrollment goes down, the numbers of teachers is frozen. Moving on to the enrollment vendor issue that was tabled earlier this evening. I believe our enrollment is not going to follow the Pell projections. I think I've seen 3 or 4 indicators that enrollment is probably going to be flat in the fall compared to this year, and flat or rising after that. A couple homes in my development went up for sale this month. One of them, after 6 days on the market, had on Zillow had something like 600 views, and the other one 800 views. So there's a public out there in a buying mood. You know, maybe the other thing is that recessions don't go on forever. I think you've seen a lot of political statements to the effect that this one is recovering slower than the others. But you know, a recession fundamentally is tied to business climate, and I think after 6 or 7 years, the people at Merck have decided that you know, they've laid everyone off, so there's no one more to lay off, or something perhaps not that extreme. And also, Pennsylvania now is supplying natural gas to most of the country. When they get the pipelines, they want to utilize the Port of Philadelphia a lot. The river channel is being deepened. The airport is being expanded. There's a lot of construction cranes in Philadelphia. You know, more workers, and they're going to need places to live. So, you know, we need a new enrollment projection that goes beyond the short-term cohort survival methods. And I think that both the Connecticut outfit and the Montgomery County outfit can do comparable efforts. And if we wait and get a projection in, let's say, January versus September, Dr. Zerby this evening has said the effect of that is if there was a school consolidation, it would be delayed in time a year, and delaying in time a year is $1 million. So spending $33,000 for Malone and McBroom is trivial compared to saving $20,000
finish up, please.
With the Planning Commission. So I would, I think there's harm to the process in not going with the vendor that gives us a better schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comment? All right. So may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All those in favor? Thank you, everybody.